Well, welcome everyone, and thanks for coming to day 2 of our family gathering and our Family Education Day. I know I'm excited to hear some of the speakers, so this should be fun. First, we'd like to welcome Jennifer Stout. Jennifer holds a Bachelor of Science degree in Education from Temple University and a Master's of Science degree in School Psychology from Eastern University. In addition, she holds professional certificates in the areas of early elementary and special education, as well as school psychology. Jennifer started her career as a special education teacher working with students who were diagnosed with significant behavioral disabilities. She worked in this capacity both within the public school system as well as out of district placements. After several years in special education, Jennifer worked as a first grade regular education teacher. After receiving her master's degree, she began working as a school psychologist. As a school psychologist, she is responsible for psychoeducational evaluations, data collection and analysis, progress monitoring, academic interventions, behavioral interventions, and mental health services. Jennifer also has a 6-year-old son named Ryan. Ryan began having seizures at 5 months of age and was diagnosed with an SCN8A gene mutation in 2015 when he was 4 years old. In early 2017, Jennifer became a volunteer with the Acute Syndrome Foundation. She works tirelessly as an advocate for her son, as well as all children diagnosed with SCN8A. Jennifer lives right outside Philadelphia with her husband, Derek, and son, Ryan. Welcome, Jennifer.
Can I use the hand one? Okay, can't really see my slide. Hi, everybody. Okay. So, as I was already introduced, I started my career as a teacher. I was a teacher for just under 10 years. I currently work as a school psychologist in my 6th year, and more importantly, I'm an SCN8A mom. So I get it. I get it. Can I take this off at all or no? I can't really see my slide. That's fine. That's fine. When I went back to work after the summer 2 years ago, my boss had us do this like social building thing at the beginning of the year. You know, all those things you love to do. You just want to go in, you want to get your first day over with. He gave us all a shell that he found on the beach, and what we had to do was write some sort of quote on our shell and keep it in our office or in our classroom. So one of the things that I have hanging in my office right now, and it struck me because I struggle sometimes with some of the difficulties that Ryan has. And one of the things that I look at every day and think to myself is, every child is gifted. They just unwrap their packages at different times. So I think that's really important to remember. So when I thought about how I was going to present this, one of my biggest struggle was, how do I take something that is such a large topic and condense it? So I thought, when I have meetings with parents, what are the things that they struggle with the most in understanding, or what do they come in not even having any knowledge about? So that's kind of where I focused my presentation. So the crux of it are key terms. We in schools use acronyms all the time. We throw them out like it's nothing, and I have parents look at us sometimes like, what does that mean? So the first one, and so you know, these are all federal definitions, so this, regardless of what state you live in, these are federal guidelines. So the first is FAPE, Free Appropriate Public Education. So what does that mean? So special education and related services. Related services are your speech, your OT, your PT, any type of therapies that are designed to meet the needs of all school-age children at public expense. So this is not something that should be coming out of your pocket unless, of course, you're also getting outside services. Special education, if your child has an IEP, which I'll talk about in a minute, your child is considered a special education student through the age of 21. So it's not so much grade, oh, they're in 12th grade, so now they're done after their 12th grade year. They can continue to receive services through the district until they're 21 years of age if they have an IEP. You also have the right as a parent to examine school records and participate in meetings. So I think you kind of already know that you can participate in meetings, but you have every right to request your child's records. Parents have, oh, I already said that. Parents must be given notice of any proposal to change their child's educational placement. So a school cannot call you and say, we've decided that this particular setting isn't really right for your child anymore, we're going to move them into this setting. They can't do it. You have to be part of that discussion. You are also entitled to an independent educational evaluation under FAPE. So as a school psychologist, one of my biggest job responsibilities is assessing children, doing cognitive assessments, achievement assessments, behavioral, and I make a recommendation for children. I either give them a diagnosis or I don't, and I make a recommendation for their placement. But you as parents still have the right to get an outside evaluation. It is at your own cost. The districts don't have to pay for that. And to be honest, they actually don't have to accept it. They have to look at it, they have to read it, they have to consider it, but they do not have to take the recommendations in there and apply them. So it's just something really important to keep in mind. And the last thing, parents can initiate a due process hearing for failure to a school district to comply with FAPE. So if for some reason you feel like your district is not doing legally what they're supposed to do for your child, you can take them to court. Should this be the first step? No. I'd like to play nice first, kill them with kindness, and then be, your mama bear, your papa bear if you need to. A lot of times districts and parents don't actually make it to court. A lot of times there's a settlement. Districts don't like to do this. It's really, really expensive for them. So, do this if you have to, but, it's usually the last resort. What does appropriate mean? And this is, the whole free is very easy to understand. They have to provide your child with a free education. But what's appropriate? What you think is appropriate for your child is not necessarily what the district is going to think of as appropriate. Appropriate doesn't mean the best. So you might want this particular program for your child. It might be the best in the state. It might be the best in the country. It doesn't matter. Does it meet the needs of your individual child? That's what the district is going to look at. So appropriate is a bit of a gray area, and that's where you're going to have conversations with your district. Your child's academic and functional needs have got to be met. The child has to have access to the general education curriculum and environment to the maximum extent possible. So maybe your child needs to be in a specialized classroom for academics, but if possible, they should be doing lunch and gym and music and all of these field trips and all of these things with their regular education peers. Their IEP must be followed, and I'll get into the IEP in a minute, and the program must be reasonably structured to enable the child to receive educational benefits. So if a child is in a learning support classroom, but they need something more than that, we can't keep them there because they're not getting what they need from an educational standpoint. So what does appropriate look like? This is also something that can really run the gamut. And when Dr. Schreiber was talking a little bit last night about IEPs, I was thinking about this slide because where your child could be really could be all over the place. So maybe the regular education classroom is appropriate for them. Maybe it's the special education classroom, but even the special education classroom can fall under so many different settings. Modified schedules. We do this a lot for our middle school kids, so who have a lot of anxiety. So they come, they're in regular education classrooms, but their schedule is modified. They only do half a day. Your child can be in special ed full-time, all day long, at a supplemental or itinerant level, and I'll talk about what supplemental and itinerant means. So another key term is IEP. I'm sure everyone here has heard that term, but the key word there is individualized. No two IEPs should look the same. Every state has their own form, so they'll structure-wise will look the same, but the content should not be the same. It needs to be individualized for your child. It must tell you where your child is now, so those are your present levels, how their disability affects involvement and progress in general education. They have to have measurable annual goals, and I have a specific slide just for this because this is a huge piece that you as parents really need to understand. Measurable is a really important word. How much time the child will spend in regular versus special education. They have to tell you that. Must be updated at least once a year, but at any time, you as a parent can say, I want an IEP meeting. It doesn't have to be just once a year. And that's what I have on the last slide. So this is not an all-inclusive list. By far, this is not all that's in an IEP. There are like 30 pages at least. But these are like the big pieces. So what does a measurable goal look like? So I have first and the second one. So the first one, given a 3-step direction, Ryan will promptly follow all 3 steps in correct order in 9 out of 10 trials. So over 10 consecutive times, if he does it 9 times, and baseline, so before we start the goal, where is he right now? Because we can't monitor a goal if we don't know where they are now. Ryan currently follows 2-step directions. Or Ryan will follow 3-step directions. Which one do you think is measurable, the first or the second? Yep, the first one is measurable. The second one doesn't tell you anything. Your IEPs, and I see them missing all the time, are baseline. How can you write a goal for a child if you don't know where they are at this particular moment? You can't. And this is, I think, also what Dr. Schreiber was getting to last night, is that, you know, a kid has a goal and it's 2 years above where they are or 2 years below where they are. Well, then you don't have a very good baseline. So it has to tell you where they are now, and then it has to be measurable. 9 out of 10 trials. If you don't have that, how do we know if they met that goal or if they didn't meet that goal? So if you see number 2, that second one on your child's IEP, you need to call them out on that. This is what I was saying to you earlier about supplemental itinerants. These are those words districts throw around a lot as well, and parents don't necessarily understand what they mean. I will tell you that these are Pennsylvania terms. I'm not sure if they're federal or not. They may not be, but the idea is the same, because they have to tell you how often your child is in special education versus regular education. So for full-time, if the child is in the regular education classroom more or equal to 80% of the day, then they're considered full-time. Supplemental is more than 20%, but less than 80%, and itinerant is less than or equal to 20%. So you'll have to, like I said, IEPs, the structure is the same, and it may look different for every state. Towards the end of the IEP, regardless of what state you're in, there's a page that they have to report to their state saying these percentages. So another key term, this is my favorite part of the IEP because I just get excited because I write them, but specially designed instruction. So a lot of people look at them and go, well, that's the same as goals. They're not the same as goals. Specially designed instruction are, okay, here are your goals. What are we going to do to help your child reach those goals? Those are your SDIs. So they're adaptations to the child's programming. These can be anything under the sun, and these are just some of the examples. Extra time on tests or assignments. Reduced visual field. This is something my son Ryan is absolutely 100% going to need. I do it with him with homework every night. There's 4 lines of math, or 4 problems. I have to cover the last 3 because he can't focus on the first line with the other 3 lines there. Then he's all over the place. I'm down here. Ryan, you need to put it up here, and then he's down here. I have to cover it. So reducing the visual field. If they have a test and there's 20 items on the test, maybe they need a good portion of those covered up. That's what reducing the visual field is. Alternate assessments. Ryan is not going to show his teachers what he knows for a test. And I told them then, granted, he's only kindergarten, I'm hoping they're not giving him too many tests, but he's just not. Even when he sat down with a school psychologist and they told me that his language was, with average 100, it was like 65. I cried. And then I thought, wait a minute, he's not, I know he knows how to do these things because I see it every day. He's not showing them through a test. So alternate assessments is really important. Steps broken down into smaller chunks. This is more for middle school. Study guides, guided notes, reduced number of items, use of a computer for written assignments. I go crazy when a middle school teacher says to me, oh, I gave them an F because I couldn't read the assignment. That doesn't mean they didn't learn the content. It means that they have awful handwriting. And testing in a smaller environment. Least restrictive environment, LRE, this is another big term that I think we throw around a lot and don't explain to parents what it is. To the maximum extent appropriate, children with disabilities have to be educated with their non-disabled peers. So it doesn't matter how severe your child is from an academic standpoint, they need to be involved with their regular education peers to the maximum extent possible. Another one is, this is really important for you guys to know. Until you sign this paper, nothing is to happen with your child from an educational standpoint. So it's called a NOREP, Notice of Recommended Educational Placement. So your child might have an evaluation, you sit down with the school psychologist, they go over the results. You sign a piece of paper saying, you reviewed this with me, great, thank you. Then you sit down with the IEP, you sign a piece of paper there saying, great, you reviewed this for me. Does not mean you gave them permission to do anything with your child. When you sign this paper, that's when you're saying, I give you permission to put them in a learning support classroom or to put them in an out-of-district placement because their needs can't be met in a school setting. This is really important. Another thing is that you do not have to sign this document in the meeting. You're going to go into these meetings if you haven't already been, and it's one of the most overwhelming things in the world. I do this for a living. Being on the other side of that table is a completely different ballgame. And when they hand me those papers, and I'm just like, you don't have to make that decision in that meeting, and don't be left to think you have to. You have 10 days to take all the paperwork home, look it over, call them back, ask questions, ask for another meeting, ask people you know that aren't affiliated with the school. Within 10 days, you do have to make a decision. But if you don't feel comfortable, don't do it there. I don't believe so. It's federal. It's a federal mandate. What state are you in? Where? This is a federal law. Yeah. And districts don't necessarily tell you, and again, I don't think it's because they're trying to get anything over on you. I mean, I really think for the most part, people really do want what's best for our children from an academic standpoint. And the educational system is just as difficult as the medical system. I don't think it's from a we don't want you to know standpoint. I think it's just we do this all the time and don't necessarily think about it. It's like, oh, you're okay with this? Okay, well then sign here. But you do have 10 days. So timelines. This is also something that's really important. If your child is being evaluated, who wants to sit? It's like when you go to get a medical test and you have to wait months for the results. It's the same thing when your child is getting evaluated. You don't want to necessarily sit and wait and wait and wait for the results. So once you sign giving the school district's permission to evaluate or reevaluate your child, they have 60 calendar days, not school days, calendar days, to have the evaluation completed. From a professional standpoint, when I'm at work, I hate this because I have 30 kids on my caseload right now, and I'm thinking, oh my God, how am I going to get these kids tested, right? But from a mom perspective, I get it. You don't want to be waiting a full year to get your kid evaluated. So we have 60 calendar days. Weekends count, holidays count. In PA, summers do not count. I do not know if that is from state to state. So you could definitely find out by going online, or I could find out if you wanted me to for you. But in PA, summers do not count. It's start of school day, last day of school. So for example, let's just say that you give permission for a district to evaluate your child. You sign it on January 8th. The evaluation must be in your hands by March 9th. They then have 30 more days to implement the IEP, so they have to have the IEP in your hands by April 8th, and then they have 10 days to implement that IEP, to have your child in whatever placement you all agreed they would be in. So that would be by April 18th. So you can see if you sign on January 8th, everything needs to be done by April 18th. Most of our, is there anybody in here whose child has not been evaluated ever from a school standpoint? Oh, a few. Okay. You get early intervention? Yeah. Okay, so that's where it gets confusing. So you think about school and you think, well, my child's not school age yet, so they haven't been evaluated. If your child did early intervention or they did any type of, they technically received an initial evaluation. It's not the same as a school district evaluation, but so you're all going to go into a school district and your child would get it's considered a reevaluation because it's not the first time they're assessed. So reevaluations have to occur every 3 years because your child is not the same child they are today that they're going to be in 3 years from now. So they must be evaluated every 3 years unless your child has an intellectual disability diagnosis. That used to be called mental retardation. They now changed it to ID. If they have that diagnosis, they have to be evaluated every 2 years. Parents and school personnel can request that a child be evaluated or reevaluated at any time. So let's just say your child's evaluated. 2 years from now, you're like, something's not right or something's changed. You can request another evaluation. Yeah, so if you call and you say, I want my child reevaluated, they have 10 days to respond to you and say yes or no. And I'm going to be honest, they can say no, but just keep pushing because they really can't say no. They'll say no and hope you go away. Maybe, but they really can't say no. And then, yes, the timeline is exactly the same. Yep. So educational placements, this is such a thorn in my side, not just from a personal standpoint with my son, but even from a professional standpoint. So many times I feel a child needs a certain placement, but districts are like our businesses, unfortunately. Money rules the world, and we can't place them in certain spots because either they don't exist or we need to make them or whatever. But true or false, my child has an autistic diagnosis, so he must go to an autistic classroom. False. Please memorize the statement. Your diagnosis, your child's diagnosis does not dictate their placement. So they can have an intellectual disability diagnosis with an IQ of 74, I don't know. But if they can function in a regular education classroom, that's where they need to be. They can have an autistic diagnosis, maybe they need learning support, a smaller environment. Just because you have a certain diagnosis does not mean they need to be in the environment that matches in terms of terms. Please remember that. So this is just an example of some of the educational placements, and you can see this is like a really straightforward autistic support, learning disabled, learning support, and down the line. This is appropriate for some, absolutely. But this is really how it should work. And this is a lot more confusing to look at, but this is really how it should be. We need to, the diagnosis, I mean, I don't want to say it's not meaningful because it is, but it's more what are we going to do for your child? We can call them whatever we want to call them, but what are we going to do for them? So you can see autistic children can be in any environment, and this, the same thing with all of the rest of them. That's what makes it all individualized. Has anyone heard of this term, other health impairment, OHI? I think most of our kids, that's what their diagnosis is or will be. I'm not going to read that's the federal definition for OHI. You can see epilepsy's under it. But SCN8A is not, obviously. And I don't even think that list is all-inclusive. It's really just other health impairment means your child has a medical diagnosis that is interfering with their ability to perform in school in some level. Ryan has an OHI diagnosis, and I do expect that most of your children will get that diagnosis when they go to school, when they switch over from early intervention to where they are now. Even if they don't, it doesn't matter. They still should get individualized instruction, but this is where most of our kids are going to follow because the bottom line is it's this mutation which is causing them to have whatever issues they're having. And this diagnosis also does not dictate placement. Children with OHI can be in any environment.
So if you have a kiddo that has an autism, would this be like a secondary
Diagnosis?
Yeah, like in school, or would they just one versus the other, whichever one is more severe?
Yeah, so this is where, you have federal laws, but, when it comes to different districts, they do sort of have some leeway in interpreting the law the way they want. I mean, they can only go so far with that. So, and it changes. So when I first started working in the district I was working in, you could have two diagnoses, a primary and a secondary. So it might be autistic would be your primary, and OHI would be secondary or vice versa. But now my district says, you're not doing that. You can only have one. What's the primary, and then we'll work from that. So it is, I don't think there's any one answer to that. I think it could be district to district. But again, I hate to say it doesn't matter, but that's not what's going to drive your child's education. So, as long as you feel that the diagnosis they give is not inappropriate, then I'm not really sure it matters. You're welcome. So the last piece is advocacy, and I don't need to tell any of you what that is or how to do it because you already do it. But like I said before, I don't think that most districts are trying to get you or get anything over on you. I think districts and schools really want what's best for your child, not more than you do, obviously, but like I said, money rules the world, money rules school districts. Better school districts with more money have more resources, and that's just the bottom line. So you need to be their advocate from an educational standpoint, just like you are from a medical standpoint, and it can be just as hard. When I was my original plan, my grandiose plan when I did this was to really come with like state-by-state advocacy groups for people. But SCNA kicked our butt, and Ryan has been having a really rough time, so that didn't happen. So I'm like, okay, how can I best do this? So I did some research, and this really was the best, and I read the website, and I'm like, are you seriously going to put this up there? But it really seems great, and no matter what state you're in, you can access it, and you can find things like educational consultants. Educational consultants are like myself, they're school psychologists. Different states have different names for them. Regular psychologists, healthcare specialists, advocates, attorneys, parent support groups. This is really, I looked through it and I was like, wow, how have I not come across this myself? So I would definitely take a look at that website. You know, we've had parents come in with advocates, and I think it's a really great thing for you guys to at least have one in your pocket. Just like anything else, there's good ones and not so good ones. You know, you kind of need to figure it out. But when districts know you're coming with somebody that knows their stuff, it does make a difference. So it's nice, you know, I know when I have a parent coming in that has a lawyer, or you step up your game just that much more. So I think it's good to have one. And one of this quote struck me. Dealing with general education, regular education, requires politics. Dealing with special education requires knowledge of the law, which is so very true, because special education students are the ones that really have the rights, and you need to know what they are so that you can best help your child. Any questions?
I don't know if the terms are the same. Does every state
Have first steps and next steps, or is it different names? I know it's early intervention. Is it pretty much the same?
Yeah, so early intervention is the umbrella term, and then different states are going to have
Different stuff.
And then some states have some that are the same. Like I've never heard of, and I do a lot with early intervention, so I personally have never heard of that. But so yeah, different states will have different things, but ultimately they should be looking at the same issues and dealing with them. If you moved you moved to Texas or you moved to PA, your child still should have received the same service.
So first steps for us in Missouri is the early intervention until she turns 3.
Yep.
And then after 3, she goes to next steps. So we're kind of looking at that transition because it can't happen over the summer and her birthday, you know, that whole thing.
Right.
So I'm just trying to kind of be prepared, because they're talking, okay, with next steps, she would go to a special education preschool and get her therapies through there. Is that a requirement that I have to send her to that special education preschool to get those therapies, or is it something that I can have to keep her at home and they come to us still? Like,
again, it goes to that what's appropriate.
Okay.
So the short answer is no. You don't have to do anything. You're her parent, and you can do what's best for her. When you sit down at the meeting, these are conversations you will have, and again, it goes back to that word appropriate. So yes, you can opt to have it at home and say, I would like the therapist to come to us, and they could say to you, fine, but they could also say to you, no, this is what we think is best for her, and that's where a discussion has to happen. So it's not a yes or no, but you definitely have the right to say, this is what I would like, and here's why, and then see what they say coming back. But again, it goes to that's appropriate, and if what they want to provide for your child is appropriate and it can be proven that it's appropriate, they can deny your request.
Okay.
But again, if you have a discussion, a lot of times that can go a long way.
And then most likely, if she does go to the special education preschool, she would have to have an aide with her, most likely.
Personal care assistant is a lot of times what they're called. They're called PCAs. But yes, and that's something we're going to be fighting for our son as well. And you know, I think some places, depending on where you are and what the resources are, they sign off on it. And when we went to our district to get him signed up, they heard what he has, and they were like, oh, here. Like, they don't want that liability. You might go somewhere else, and they might give you pushback, but this is something where SCN8A, you can prove that a PCA is appropriate.
Okay, thank you.
It's
not so much a question, but it's just to throw this out there, because this was just brought to my attention about a week ago. We had an extended IFSP. We were very fortunate. For as much grief as Maryland gives us, they're very good with special education. Just for you guys that are around the same age as Addie, you are welcome to call schools and set up tours to look and check out if you are comfortable or not. We actually are scheduled to do that this week. And if you're not comfortable, you still have the option for homeschooling, and they still have to provide you with certain services. So if you're not comfortable, it's still something we're teeter-tottering on because Addie is neutropenic and we have not done vaccinations and stuff. So because we have the extended IFSP and she turns 4 in January, at the end of this school year is when we have to transition to an IEP.
Right.
So we have to start kind of looking ahead, but just so you guys know that there are more options than like you have to throw your kid on a bus and send them to school.
The one slide that I had up here that showed, you know, regular ed or out-of-district placement or homebounds or whatever, homeschool is one of them. And again, it's a conversation, but you are not, it's not this cookie-cutter model that you're sometimes led to believe that it is.
I have a question. We live in Illinois, and we have a lot of problems with Illinois paying anybody. And we actually were unable to even get any therapists at all through early interventions, and we actually had to leave early interventions and just get, I mean, Illinois Medicaid still paid for therapies, but we have to drive over to Indiana.
What was their reasoning that they say we don't have them?
They don't pay. They don't have any. And we live out in the country, and we were driving to stay in early interventions. I could drive about 45 minutes to get physical. They could not get a speech therapist at all, and I had an OT who also had a second job, so she had to cancel on me all the time because Illinois wasn't paying. Is that okay, or is there something?
No. No, it's not okay. Okay, so, and this is a perfect example of what I mean by different districts, different resources, different parts of the country. The quick short answer is, no, it's not okay, and could you have taken them to court? Yes. That's a process, and I do believe it's called due process for a reason, because it's not something, it's like any other litigation, it's not something that is quick, but they can't, when your child needs something, they just can't say, no, sorry, can't do it. They can't, and now they do all the time, and they hope you go away, and they hope they do what you did. They hope you do what you did and drive to a different state, but you could technically.
Thankfully, it was just as far to drive to Indiana because we're right on the border. It was just as far to go to a child facility, and we're actually very happy there because it's an actual facility, has good equipment, good therapists and things like that. But we were just floored. Yeah, thankfully it did work out, but we were just floored that they could tell us, no, he just, and they kept pushing back speech. They kept saying, oh, well, he's not 18 months. Oh, well, he's feeding himself. You don't need speech. And I'm like, I'm pretty sure. And then we got over there, and they're like, oh, yeah, he does.
This is why it's good to have an advocate, and a good advocate, obviously. But this is for reasons like this, when things like this pop up, because they really can't say, oh, well, we can't find anybody, so sorry. It's just legally that's not okay. So this is why having an advocate is a good thing.
Okay, which is good to know.
This is not so much a question, almost just like a suggestion. With Max's case, because his IEP is actually coming up, and it's in Miami. We have a foundation called Miami Lighthouse for the Blind, where they, if your child has, is legally blind or has CDI or something like that, they come and offer free services to your child. But at the same time, they help with the IEP, and I know our therapist, coordinator, whatever you want to call her, she's actually setting it up so that Max could have homebound care. So I'll be happy to share whatever way she does that. I mean, granted, it's Florida. I don't know if it's the same
It doesn't look the same everywhere.
But maybe to just get the buzz. So like just going back to what you were saying, homebound care or homebound schooling is possible. And So so there is a way to do it, because she even told me, like, I'm going to help you through it, because if not, they're going to try to put him in the school system and not want to send
Because if they
people
put them
to
in
the
the
home.
school system,
Yeah.
it's cheaper because that's where they educate their children. But
Right,
if
right,
they have to pay somebody additional money to come to your house, that's costing them additional money, and that even though that might be what's best for your child, it's still costing them money. So they may give pushback, now depending on how severe your child is, they may know that we can't educate them in-house, so they may not push back, but yeah.
So
we had Wyatt in preschool at home, and he had speech and occupational therapists who came out to the house every week, as well as a teacher who came out every day, just because he couldn't stay awake for more than 2 hours at a time, and it just was not something that we could do. And it was a really great service for him, and it was nice once he was able to get into a special ed preschool, but it was really good that they offered it, and it wasn't a huge fight, so hopefully, if that's what your kiddo needs, it's an option.
One thing I wanted to point out, when you were saying it made me think, I don't know if this applies for any of you, but if you decide you want to put your child in either private or Catholic or whatever, like we have Ryan in a private school right now, they do not have to implement an IEP. They don't have to provide your child with therapies. It's not, because they're not receiving federal funds, they're not receiving state funds. So if that's something you do decide, just know that, like, we had to do dual enrollment with our public school district to get him the therapies he needed, and we have to take him to the school to get his therapies. Except for PT, they come to his school, but his school does not offer those services, nor do they have to implement. He doesn't have an IEP right now. It scares me a little bit because September's going to come around and he's not going to have an IEP. We'll deal with that when it comes, but just know that if you decide, like a private school, that they do not have to, and a lot of times won't, so something to keep in mind.
Mason was in early intervention like everyone else, and then at 3 during the summer he turned 3. And one of my big focuses in early intervention was swallowing, because he has the Mickey button and he used to eat, and I wanted that to continue. But then the intermediate unit, we're from Pennsylvania, so when he turned 3, he went to the intermediate unit, and they told me that that is not a goal of the school system. I did fight that. I actually threatened an attorney, but it went up several managers or supervisors, and they just stated that because it's a different pocket or bucket of money, that they don't focus on oral stimulation or swallowing.
So the idea is, and if I'm understanding your situation, the idea is it affecting their ability to access the curriculum? Now, I guess you could argue our children eat at school. So
that's what I did.
That would be your argument. I mean, no, it's not part of the curriculum. They go to lunch, don't they? They have snacks, don't they? So, and I'm sure this is the same in every state, but I know for a fact in PA, different pockets of money absolutely pay for different things, and try and get the answer to what pays for what you can't. So that's probably why you were able to get what you needed, because with a fight, it's because it technically is affecting him in school, but their thought is curriculum-based. Is it affecting his ability to access?
They're still not doing it.
Correct. Yep.
Okay. We just had to pay out of pocket.
What is it that, I'm not familiar with the Mickey button, I'm sorry. So how does he eat?
Through, it's basically a peg tube. They just call it a Mickey button.
So, and what do you need them to do for him?
In early intervention, they worked on oral stimulation, swallow, so that he could be able to take enough, which is, I believe, 30 cc's to swallow to get an actual cookie swallow or a swallow test.
So you want them to work on those?
Mm-hmm. I mean,
I'm going to be honest, you're going to have a tough fight.
Yeah.
Because he's being fed in school. He's being nutritious. Sort of, okay, because if he's being fed, their argument's going to be he's being fed, and that isn't school-based. I mean, I don't agree with it, but I can picture myself sitting in one of these meetings and listening to the higher-ups saying it's not a school-based, general academic goal.
Okay,
yeah.
Thank you.
And that's where outside therapy would probably come in. No, Dan. Mm-hmm.
If you go private and you decide you want to go back to the public school system, did you sort of like give up that right by not following the plan, or can you go back at any time?
You absolutely gave up your right to follow that plan, but you have that right. You can go back at any time. I could pull Ryan out right now and put him back in the public school system, no questions asked. Mm-hmm. Yep. Since Ryan and has SCN8A, and since I'm part of the group, I'm on the Facebook page reading it all the time. So if you have any questions, or I might not be able to answer for your specific state, but I could probably find out for you or kind of give you a direction where to go. I'd be more than happy to answer any of your questions. So you can just message me. I'd be more than happy.
Good job. I'll catch it.
Okay, if we're ready to get started, I'd like to welcome our second speaker, Greg Barnett. Greg has been a complex rehabilitation technology professional for 20 years. He graduated from the University of Tennessee at Memphis in 1992 with a degree in physical therapy. After working in several different areas of physical therapy practice, he became a certified assistive technology professional in 1999. His concentration has been pediatric seating and mobility since coming to car rehab in 1999. In 2008, he successfully completed the requirements for certification as a seating and mobility specialist through Rehabilitation Engineering Society of North America. It's RESNA. Well, welcome. Thank you.
Is it all right if I do the same?
Mm-hmm. So. You can change in laser.
Oh, laser beam. Yeah. Laser beam. Is it on? Okay. Okay. Ooh, hey, hot mic. Okay, thank you guys. Appreciate the opportunity to be here. Like the slide says, there's a bunch. Okay, so 30 minutes may not do us justice, but we're going to try to hit the highlights of these pieces of equipment. And I know many of you are very familiar with pediatric equipment. I see some familiar devices. So what is my connection to your group or family? So I have a slide here. I thought about this last week, and Daniel was kind enough to update my slides this morning. So my connection is Miss Lily. I'm not sure if anybody knows the Varners, but they're very special to me. So I thought, how long have I known Lily? And I was quite surprised to look back through my history and thinking about all the different equipment and opportunities I had to interact with the family. So I'm not sure how many hours that is, but it's quite a list of equipment. I didn't quite realize that we had spent that much time together. I'm sure Lily is enthralled by my voice up here right now. So lots of things. So we started out early on with a simple bath chair when Lily was about 2 years old, and I can't believe that she is 19. That makes me 23 at this point, I think, right? So just to say that, this is a family thing, just as you guys know, but my relationship with my kiddos it's like family as well. I've grown to know them, grown to know their needs, which is very important for a supplier like myself. It's not just about the equipment or the child, it's about the family and everyone involved. So with that being said, our recommendations are that you get to know someone who is qualified to provide equipment and go through the process the proper way. There's lots of equipment out there. Things could be purchased, but what we like to do is get to know the needs of the individual, the family, through a team approach. In our clinic in Knoxville, we work with a physiatrist, and through evaluation and talking with the family, we discover the needs of the individual child and base the equipment around that. So it's not cookie cutter. Every little chair there's many configurations, so we have to find what's appropriate for that child and the family. So we'll talk about lots of different things briefly. I've got about 1,000 slides. I think that's, I don't know, 2 seconds per slide, right? So positional strollers. A lot of folks, we start out in little strollers because we have little guys and we've got lots of things to carry, but we also may have positional needs. So these things can be fairly complex. Ottobock is a company that provides a lot of different equipment, being this is the little squiggles. So this little chair would be appropriate for a little guy, a couple years old up through maybe kindergarten, with growth adjustments throughout. The next phase of that would be the MyGo, whereas a similar piece of equipment that you've become familiar with, so hey, this has worked great, let's look at the next stage for the positioning. This provides trunk support, proper head support, there's tilt and space, therapeutic positioning. Ottobock, again, another stroller, a little less complex, but still offers positioning and growth, and some good wheels for terrain. I saw someone has a Zippy Voyage here. So Baby Jogger and Quickie collaborated a few years ago to provide a stroller base with a complex seating system. So it's very nice, easy to fold, right? Yeah. Lots of storage. Storage is important, right? So you go and shopping, it's fantastic, right? Fantastic. So the other thing about this little stroller, I don't know if you can see, there's 2 there. The one in the back is a commercially available stroller. So there's not a lot of difference there. That's right. Yeah. So something important to know. That's why someone like myself, having vast knowledge, it's like, hey, we're expecting another little guy. Is there a stroller that maybe accommodates both children? Possibly. So very important that whoever you're working with has, a little extra insight to those things. And those things are gained through years of practice, right? And you guys know this as well, talking with the other family members here. It's like, hey, how's that worked out for you guys? I don't actually use the equipment on a daily basis, so it's valuable feedback that I get from the parents, and then I can relay that message. Some more seating from a company called R82. You guys, if you're familiar with Snugseat, these companies collaborated and combined efforts a year or so ago. But the Stingray is a neat little thing. It actually has a carbon fiber frame. So everyone knows that that's probably very expensive, right? And with that being said, one reason that we want to go through a process of evaluation with a physician and a physical therapist is for funding. So if we don't follow the proper steps and procedures, that necessary piece of equipment may not be funded. And out of pocket, these little guys are a couple of grand easy, so we want to make sure that we do what's appropriate and do it the right way. Dynamic systems. Anybody's kids move a little bit, and if you're strapped down and you want to move, it gets, it could be difficult. So some of the companies actually provide some dynamic seating systems. This was one of my favorites, the kids' rock chair, and this thing will extend and come back to positional position. Now, the only problem is this system is not available now. So if you have a lot of money, maybe you could buy this so that we could continue to provide this piece of equipment. But there's still some out there available, and a lot of different sizes, even for some larger kids, which is very important for moving and stretching out. I don't know, has anybody ever been positioned in a wheelchair, personally? No, so we think about these little guys, and a lot of them that require lots of positioning, they don't get to move a lot. We struggle to maintain a seated position. We don't want them sliding, but some of these kids need to move and stretch with their muscular tone. So this chair did a great job of that, but hopefully we'll get it back. There are some other components for some seating systems. The Panda from Snug Seat or R82 has a dynamic component on their backrest, so it does extend and come back to a neutral position. There's a chair from PDG. This is a little more elaborate positional chair. It tilts in space, but it also has a dynamic backrest on it. Standers. Anyone have experience with standing? Yes? Okay. Lots of different standers. Lecky, which is part of Ottobock now, has several standers, squiggles. So what we've come to figure out in therapy is early intervention in standing. A lot of difficulties with kiddos later on with their hips if they're not weight bearing early. And there's some new research out about optimal standing position in abduction. They're actually standing like this, weight bearing. And the reason is for hip development. So the femur and the pelvic bone can line up properly. So later on it could be a problem. So Squiggles has a cool little system with multiple bases. So we can even do a little dynamic stander with big wheels. So you don't just have to be static in standing. The next sizing for Lecky is the MyGo, again following their seating, so we can accommodate growth in larger children. Easy Stand Zing. This is the little system where they've really come out with the standing and abduction, and they have several different models. So it says 6, not 7, but different sizing. So evaluation, proper sizing is important. We want to provide a stander that is appropriately sized for the kiddo now, but also does it offer growth? Something that you learn through trial and error. You know, early on, hey, this is the right size, but Bobby outgrew that stander in 6 months. Well, what are we going to do? We're going to take that one back and do another one, right? So the little Zing here actually is a true three-positional stander, so we can do supine, vertical, and actually a little prone standing. Following on up, different sizes. So we can actually get a little guy in a stander early, about a year old. So in the past, we couldn't accommodate that with the different sizes. So early intervention in standing is a good thing. The Bantam actually offers a stander whereas the child can actually sit and come from sitting to standing. As you know, as individuals get larger, transferring is difficult, right? So lifting a child that maybe is 150 pounds into a stander can be a problem, but if they can transfer from sitting, we can get into a sitting position, then come to standing, much easier for the caregivers. The standers continue to grow, so there is a stander for all sizes, up to adult size. R82 has a cute little stander called the Toucan. Early on, this was one of the smaller standers where we could get our little guys in a prone position with an activity tray, and the other therapists like this, occupational therapy, so we've got some activities going on with our hands. Bath chairs. This is good stuff, right, guys? Okay. Bath chairs. So bath time's important, very important. So there's some standard bath chairs out there, but what do we do if we don't have the ability to sit? As you know, bathing is a kind of a dangerous activity for children. So kids are slippery when wet, right? Soaked up, I mean, they get away from you. So you need a place that's safe and it's easy to transfer to. Rifton is a great company. They provide a lot of very high quality equipment, and their bath chair has been really like a gold standard for many years. In the past it was called the Blue Wave, so they only had blue. Now it's just the Wave and we've got pink, okay? I mean, that color's a good thing. So this little guy, you can sit it in the tub. It'll sit nearly flat within the tub, but it provides back support. The back can recline. It can lay flat. So you can position your child in a, supported position for bathing. Now they have a transfer system, which has been a big deal for us, for the larger kiddos who need to get in there. The difficulty with this is it sits up above the tub. So you really have to do a handheld shower, but still yet, it's a good thing. Lecky offers a similar system. The legs are adjustable, the back, the leg rest. So that little chair can sit flat into the tub or up, kind of level with the tub, and still provide support. Soft mesh, and antibacterial. And it folds flat so you can actually hang it like on the back of the bathroom door, which is helpful. And that system actually accommodates individuals up to 65 inches tall. The benefit of the Riften over the Lecky now is the larger sizes are actually wider. In the past, kids grow, mostly they get taller, but then when they start to get a bit wider, it becomes an issue. We had essentially a void. If you were a smaller adult or an older child, there was really a gap between adult-sized equipment and pediatric equipment. So the Riften system really kind of filled that void a bit because things were either too big or too small. So that's something to think about. Shower Buddy, the tub dipper. This is an interesting little device. So it just kind of sits over the tub, and you've got a handle that flips over. You just kind of dip into the tub, right? So, a simple piece of equipment, but a good idea because, we all know bath time is therapeutic. You like to be in the water, not hovering above the water, right? So, fun bath time. This kid's having a ball. I don't think there's any water in there, though. Okay, so we get up to larger individuals or kiddos, and we're thinking about transfers within the bathroom. So risky business. Bathrooms are small, they're wet, hard surfaces, so it's hard to get, into the tub. With the transfer systems, we actually have a two-piece system, whereas the section with the seat on it, you could actually transfer to that within the bathroom. That system rolls in, the other section sits in the tub, you connect them and it slides over. So you eliminate a risky transfer within the bathroom. Again, it's going to be above the tub, so handheld shower is going to be necessary there. So a little trick that I've learned along the way for bathing with this type system, you worry about getting the water all over the floor, right? So, and you guys may already know this, but I thought it was cool. So you take a shower curtain and you bring it down low, and you let the curtain hang in. So your shower curtain's here, bath chair's there, so you can keep the water in the tub, and you just take the shower curtain out of the way. Does that make sense? Lily said it's a good idea. Gait trainers. So ambulation. I know one of the things that we did with Lily early on was a little pony walker. I think I should show that in here, but Lily was riding her ponies for a while. She actually had two, so it was a fun device. Back to Riften. Riften has, their gait trainer has evolved over the years. They've got a really great product that is fairly new with the Pacer. And I don't know if you guys are familiar with the Pacer, but it offers a lot of different levels of support. If you see the one, I have a laser. The one on the left, your left there, just has arm prompts. So, or you can go up to even more support where we have a trunk support, a seat, different things. So very adaptable for kiddos for different levels or different needs. And it can be a device that can be used progressively. So initially we may need more support. But these things come in 5 different sizes. So they have the mini, which is almost microscopic. So little tiny, kids outgrow that very quickly. I've actually processed a few of those, whereas by the time we get insurance approval and provide the equipment, it's too small. That's unfortunate, right? But we know those things happen, so we just get the correct piece of equipment. Oh, there's the pony. So the pony is a little dynamic system. Put the kids on that thing and they can just go wild. There's not a lot of materials in front of them, so they have access to different things. Same way with the Mustang. Something interesting about R82, all of their equipment is named after an animal. So they got the pony, the Mustang, the manatee, the toucan we saw earlier. So I asked them, you know, what would happen when they ran out of animal names. And I don't think they ever thought about that, but oh yeah, there's always new ones. Yeah. Hummingbird, the platypus. I mean, there's a lot of animals, quite actually, right? You think about that. The Kid Walk. Kid Walk's a nice little walker system. Not for everybody. That's why there's so many different devices. And again, it's very important to assess your child's needs and have someone that, you know, knows what's going on. But this little system is dynamic. So you actually, it's almost like they're spring-loaded. So the apparatus behind is actually a spring system. And they have a little seat they sit on, pelvic support, trunk support, but there's nothing in front of them. So it's, you know, it's just like you're walking. And the movement of the device allows for reciprocal gait. So it's actually pretty neat. Not for everybody. It doesn't offer a lot of support. A lot of things we do have quite a bit of anterior support because our body tendency and movement is forward. So something very cool. We actually do a lot of trials with this because, you know, it's a great idea, but if it doesn't work, you know, it's a good place to hang your clothing in the bedroom, right? But it's also very expensive. So, I mean, most of the things that we do, we actually trial with kids beforehand because this is a practice and theory. We don't know how well something's going to work or even if it will work until we try it. Never rule anything out. Walkers. So, posterior walkers. We do a lot of posterior walkers. That the reason for posterior is it encourages extension. So, if you have something in front of you, the tendency is to collapse upon it, but posterior walker encourages that extension and frees up the environment in front of the kid. A lot of different sizes here, from teeny tiny up to, we can accommodate, I think, 6'4" or 6'6" with this walker. Very lightweight, folds. It's, you know, gold standard. There's two products there. The Nimbo, I've got it backwards. The Nimbo is on the left and the K-Walker is on the right. You guys may have seen these. Anterior walker. Where's my little guy that has his anterior walker? So I don't have a picture of it. So long ago in physical therapy, we had all these little tiny anterior walkers, but somewhere along the way, the popularity of those things kind of faded. So they're kind of hard to find. But there is a company, Drive Medical actually has a couple of different models. And that's, when you think of a walker, let's say like a little walker that grandma has out front of you, very similar but sized for our little guys. Transportation. So how do we transport our kids? So little guys, we transport in car seats, right? So there's a lot of specialty car seats. The thing that we have to decide within our practice is there a commercially available car seat that's appropriate? The biggest difference between special or adaptive car seats generally is the sizing. So, you know, we know that car seats are made to accommodate kids up to a certain weight capacity, all these things, but kids with normal development develop posture, trunk control, they can sit unsupported. So that's why we have larger car seats for kids. But then it gets difficulty. How do you put someone into a car seat that weighs as much as you do, right? But there's a lot of options. The Recaro is a car seat that's available commercially. This one is larger. It accommodates up to 120 pounds. So we always tell our parents that you know, the safest place to be transported within a car is in a car seat because you have support around, right? That's why, but then it gets difficult. So make sure you know your needs and you get the appropriate seat. Merritt Manufacturing. This company's great. I know Shane Merritt personally. He's a great guy and he's developed a lot of great products, and he only does car seats. So you find one thing and do it well, right? So we do a lot of Roosevelt car seats. As you can see, doesn't look much different than car seat that you might find at Costco or Walmart. But the big difference is this is sizing. It has low sides for transfers, so you can get your child in there, but this accommodates a kid up to about 105 pounds. So after they outgrow the commercial car seats, this is a good option. It's not very complicated, but it does provide a safe place to be transported. That's the idea of a car seat. Mm-hmm. Maybe, probably. You could definitely contact the manufacturer. They may have a European distributor. A lot of our items that we do, a lot of the unique items are actually European. I think there's a lot of good development in Europe. Maybe the United States is limited by the FDA for some of those things, but I'm sure that these could be gained overseas. So Shane, ask him, so we got the Roosevelt, right? Is it the Franklin or the Teddy? So it's the Teddy Roosevelt. So what's the next car seat he does? It's called the Churchill, all right? You see a trend here, right? So the Churchill is a little different. So it's a little bit more of a booster seat, okay? But it has a vest that is tethered to the seat. So, you know, it's a good option for larger kids. Has a headrest, and you can use the lap belt. But it also has a positional base. So a good option for kids that may not need all the support within the car seat, and you can use this with or without the vest. So there's Churchill, right? So if you know European history, World War II, so who would you think would be next, right? So it was United States, England, Russia, right? So I said, Shane, is the next car seat the Stalin? Now, nobody wants a Stalin car seat, right? But anyway, he went to the Chamberlain. Okay, so Neville Chamberlain was Prime Minister of England in the 30s. So there he is, you know, he's a popular guy. The Chamberlain's very similar to the Churchill in that it's a booster system. But again, you know, assessment of the kid's needs, what's most appropriate for you and your child, right? Now, he does have a Wallenberg, so this is a Spica cast car seat. Does anybody know what a Spica cast is? You don't want one for your kid. Anyway, after they do hip surgery, they'll put them in a cast from here to there. Okay, so how do you sit with that? Not very well, but you still have to transport. So this offers a little sling, so they don't have to sit at a 90-degree angle at the hip, but it gives them a safe position for transportation. Because kids unrestrained in cars, not a good thing. The Jefferson, again, very unique car seat for kiddos that have I can't even say it. Anyway, it's a disorder where the intestines are on the outside of their abdomen when they're born. So this works. I've never provided one of these, but it's there if necessary, right? And then the Hope car bed for the little tiny babies. So how do you transport those guys? They're too small for a carrier. So 4.5-pounders, kids with special conditions where they can't sit or be upright. It's essentially a protective box that you secure within the car. So just showing you these things because there's so many different options out there, and if there's a need, there is probably a product that can fill that need. Columbia Medical has some car seats. This is one Karen was telling me this morning. Lily actually used one of these. Right, Megan? Is that the green one? Yeah. So that's actually a car seat with a stroller base. Great idea, right? Well, if you've got a kid that's my size, how do you get the kid out of the car seat to put the car seat on the stroller? I don't know how you do that. So, but there's an option. We have some people, this is all they use. The Spirit, okay, so very positional car seat, lateral supports. So if there are some very specific positional needs, we can accommodate that with this car seat. Convade, who makes strollers, has a couple of different options for car seats. They actually are part of R82. They have a Carrot, which looks like a race car seat, right? Very exciting. The odd thing about the Carrot, you can get it in red, blue, or black. No orange. I don't know. It's a fun name. Strollers. Lots of different strollers. We do a lot of Convade strollers. So there's a lot of different models of the Convade. This is the Easy Rider, very simple, upright position. The Cruiser, a little more positional, 30-degree fixed position. You can do lateral supports, different things. Very nice stroller. Who has a Convade? Somebody had a Convade. Good storage underneath. The Rodeo, it's a stroller, but it's tilt. It has tilt and space and recline. That's a great product. Folds down flat. These are transportable. They have transit tie down, so they can be utilized on a school bus. Something that we have to be very aware of. Good question to ask, you know, are you going to be using this on the school bus? Do we need to make it appropriate for transportation? The Leggero Dyno. So, you know, continue your running career. Positional stroller with 3 wheels. These things fold, which is very, very nice. So you have to think about, we have to think about the family and their lifestyle. You know, just because it has wheels doesn't necessarily mean that it meets their needs for what their family wants to do. They have the Track, a little more adaptive seating there with lateral supports. The Reach, very similar to Conde, both good products. Power chairs. Anybody have experience with power chairs? Yeah? Power chairs, very, very complicated, vastly expensive. Permobil, great company. They actually have 2 chairs that are pediatric specific. The Koala is a great little chair. It's probably the smallest base. I think the youngest kiddo that I placed in a Koala was about 18 months old, and she's a phenomenal driver. Kids just get in there and go. They don't think about it. Adults, you put them in a power chair, they're like worried about, I don't know what they're worried about. Anyway, kids just do it. The Permobil K450 is a very unique chair. It actually extends down to the floor for floor transfers. Big, heavy chair. Can go anywhere. It's like a robot. About a $45,000 chair. So the Tylac Twist. We have fans of the Twist, right? So let's see. On the left is a Zippy Zone, and the right's the Twist. Very similar chairs, but there are some differences, some things that I've learned in provision of those. I like the Twist because it's a little more adjustable. Adjustability can be an issue. I was talking earlier about some adjustability issues with the Twist. But important thing to remember, a lot of people may think kids are small adults. They're not. So a small adult chair is not a pediatric chair. The good thing about the Twist and the Zone is they've developed these chairs specifically for children. So they look like the adult chairs, but there's the subtle differences that make them work for kids, right? Has to work. Other chairs, we've got a Zippy Iris. So it's a tilt and space chair. We do these for positioning. This one actually folds, but you have to take 40 components off to fold it. So is that very practical for folks? Maybe, maybe not. So you have to consider, how are we going to transport these chairs? Do you have a van? Do you have a pickup truck? What can we do to make it easier? So a lot of times we may have a couple of different systems where we have a very positional chair that kids may use at school, but we may find another way to provide a stroller for the family that they can use at other times when they don't have the ability to transport a chair that weighs 80 pounds. The chair on the right is a Quickie Kids chair. It's a little deceiving there, but that chair is probably about 12 inches off the floor. I don't know if you guys have ever seen that little chair, so it's probably like that, but a great little chair for kids to start out in. Seating. Seating is a whole, we could spend like 3 days talking about seating. I could spend 3 days talking about anything, I think, but we've got some really good custom seating, different options now. On the right, you see this is a little more traditional, what we call planar seating. Maybe a good place to start out with positional seating. It's not very accommodating, but it does offer support laterally, posterior. The picture on the left is Ride Designs custom seating. The orthotics industry and seating industry came together to design a back, which is very similar to an orthotic support. So it's actually custom molded to the individual, and it can be adjusted all those planes. I like that picture because of the arrows. PennDOT and Rojo. So another type of custom seating. Lily's experienced my custom seating for several years. And actually, we're waiting for a new seat right now that we just reshaped for her. But this seating is, the shape is captured using a bag, and we actually shape the bags to Lily or to the individual, and then that we scan it, and it's the seat and back are actually carved out of foam. So, you know, a unique fit for accommodation, positional needs, pressure relief, when off the shelf just doesn't work. Specialty beds. There's a lot of stuff, isn't there? So if you think about each one of these categories, there's at least 2 to 3 different companies that manufacture that. So again, trying to find the fit for the individual and the family. Sleep safe beds. 3 or 4 different models based upon the needs. Obviously, we've got issues of weakness. We want to prevent entrapment at night. I don't know about you, but it's very important to sleep, right? And I know a lot of parents have struggled for many years with their children because they didn't sleep because they worried about their child at night. So they've developed these beds to eliminate the possibility of entrapment. So that's the purpose of these beds. Unfortunately, with insurance, a lot of times we have to provide a standard home care bed first, and it has to, you know, we have to fail with that before we can go to the next level. But these beds offer height adjustment, safe place to sleep, head elevation, you know, different needs. And they come in various colors and woods. 1 minute. 1 minute? I thought I had 3 hours. Okay. Okay, you have 1 minute for questions. Oh, okay. 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 Well, that was the end anyway. Okay. Thanks for interrupting me there. No, we could go on for days. Okay, so as you can see, there's many options, right? So again, just to reinforce the fact, you know, find a good support group. You've done that. Families with experience are invaluable. Find a good therapist, a good physician, so that you can find the equipment that best meets your needs, and hopefully you get it paid for, right? That's the other challenge. So, questions? Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Before Mason was born, we bought a Recaro car seat just because we bought it. I didn't realize that. Do they all adjust, I guess, to make, you know, to adapt as he grows?
I don't know that all of them do. I know there are 2 Recaro seats that are termed special needs seats.
Okay, so they have like a special needs line, so I probably just got a regular Recaro.
Yes, because they are commercially available. They also make seats for Porsche, so you
That's
know
what
they're
my husband bought.
you know
it.
they're expensive,
Yeah.
right?
So
But
okay, so they make a special needs line.
they do, and they're
Thought I got lucky.
they're distributed in North America by Thomas Shilton. So there's a couple out there. You know Thomas Shilton. German, it is, yes. Correct. Man, I did a great job. No questions? I hope I've piqued your interest in seating and mobility. Again, if you have questions, you can ask me. All right? You have a question?
Would it be possible to see the slide with the clothes again? I think there was a red one, but I didn't write it.
More?
Yeah, this one. So what does the name of
It's Condade.
that? Is the company?
Mm-hmm. It's Condade's the company, and the Cruiser is the model. Mm-hmm. Yes. It's very, very nice. About. It's pretty good. The wheels are pretty good size, solid wheels. These hold up really well. Pretty durable, actually. That's our go-to stroller. We don't have a lot of problems with them. Caster bearings is about the only maintenance. You could wear the tires out, the bearings, but they can be changed. So the seating can be changed. You can wash it. Yeah, I knew I saw it. Easy Rider.
Are these able to be purchased? Because in New Zealand we have wheelchairs, not out of stroller.
Right.
So we get different wheelchairs.
That's right. So that's true here as well. We're fortunate in East Tennessee. We have a great charity we work with, Variety, Children on the Go, and they do fundraisers, and they will pay up to $3,000 a year for different devices. So it'd be a stroller. Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely. And it's all very expensive, overly expensive. Mm-hmm. The Easy Rider. Okay, good. Anything else, guys? I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. So, great group of folks.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Greg. Next up, we have, and I apologize if I butcher the name, Amy Bereiter. Amy received her bachelor's degree in communication disorders from the University of Kentucky and her master's degree in speech-language pathology from the University of Redlands. She has been a speech-language pathologist since 2004, working with toddlers through young adults. She has worked in a wide range of settings, including in-home early intervention, early childhood special education, elementary self-contained programs, pediatric rehabilitation units, university clinic, and private practice. She has developed AAC evaluation teams at several sites. Prior to relocating to Virginia in 2015, Amy was a full-time clinical assistant professor in the speech-language pathology graduate program at Northern Illinois University. Currently, she is a full-time SLP and lead assistive technology professional at Skill Builders LLC in Northern Virginia. Amy specializes in augmentative alternative communication and working with children who exhibit complex communication needs. She has worked extensively with occupational therapists and other related professionals to best understand and treat children with sensory processing disorder, visual impairments, and motor impairments. She works closely with families to educate, train, and support implementation of AAC, in the home environment and has led support groups for parents of AAC users. She also collaborates with and trains school teams in regard to language development and implementation of AAC in the educational setting. She has experience presenting locally and regionally to SLPs, teachers and assistants, occupational therapists, pediatricians, and other assistive technology professionals. She also co-developed and taught a graduate course on AAC and has guest lectured in undergraduate and graduate level courses on numerous occasions. Amy is an active member of the American Speech Language Hearing Association, including serving on its Special Interest Group 12 Professional Development Committee. Amy, thank you.
Hello. Thank you for inviting me here. I'm really excited about this. Sorry for the long introduction. That's a speech pathologist, very verbose, right? Sorry about that. Does the sound okay? Everybody can hear me? Okay, great. So what I want to do is first hear from you just really quickly. Is there parents here who have kids who are already using AAC? Are you familiar with what AAC is? Just a few? Okay, great. All right. So today what I hope to do is just an overview of what AAC is. All right. So we'll go over just really quickly some objectives. But when I was asked to do this and I said, okay, how much time do I have? And she said like 30 or 45 minutes. I got a little nervous because as he just said before us, I feel like I could talk about this all day. So I will try to condense this into the time frame that you've given me. So as she said, I am a full-time SLP. This is what I do. I work primarily with kids who are non-speaking or minimally speaking, and so this is my great passion. So what I hope to do in this short amount of time is give you an overview, a definition of what AAC is, who would need it, dispel some myths. There are many myths out there surrounding AAC, help dispel those, talk about the process perhaps of how do we start along that process, learn about some important elements that should be in any AAC system, and then answer any questions that you have, okay? And I think it's probably better if you just want to throw them out as we go, if that helps, whatever you guys want to do. So just a quick definition here. So what is AAC? Basically, it stands for augmentative and or alternative communication. So what I mean by that, in terms of augmentative, we might have kids who have some speech, or they're attempting to talk, and maybe it's not intelligible. So what I mean by augmentative is this could be in addition or augment some existing speech or existing communication. What I mean by alternative is if someone does not have any speech or hasn't developed speech yet, this is an alternative to that, okay? So this is to serve that need. So most kids, though, I have to say, it's pretty augmentative. You know, they are communicating in many ways. Maybe it's not intelligible, but they are, so it's augmentative communication for them. So I'm just going to give you a definition, like I said. So there's two main types of AAC. When we think about this, we think about unaided and aided, okay? So unaided relies on the user's body, so there's no extra tool, okay? So this is using body language, gestures, maybe sign language, pointing, eye gaze. We all do this too. And so if we talk specifically really quickly about sign language, what do you guys, do you have experience with sign language? Anybody using sign? Okay, so there are some benefits and some drawbacks to using sign language as AAC. So some of the benefits are, as you probably already know, it's portable. It goes with you everywhere. It's free. It doesn't break down. There's a lot of benefits to this. Some of the drawbacks for sign language as AAC could be that it's not universal, right? So you might go somewhere where you know their signs, or grandma knows their signs, or uncle knows their signs, but somebody else doesn't. Or if you have motor challenges in addition, then even if someone is familiar with sign language, they may not understand how your child's making it. So that's one of the drawbacks of sign language as AAC. One of the other drawbacks, I think, is that there is no auditory feedback. There's no auditory signal. You can't hear it when someone says it. You can just see it. So I think that's one of the challenges as well. The other version, we talked about unaided and aided. So this is aided. So aided AAC is a method of communication that involves additional tools or additional materials. And so we sort of further subdivide this into low-tech, mid-tech, and high-tech. So as you can see sort of on the bottom left here, that's just kind of a screenshot of an app, just a piece of paper, put into a page protector, and then to the right of that, there's something called the tech speak. That's mid-tech. And then on the tippy top, that's like a high-tech device. And so we're going to define that just so you know what those mean, okay? But just so you know, we can sort of break these into low-tech, mid-tech, and high-tech if you've heard those terms, okay? So low-tech just means that there's no auditory feedback. There's no talk, there's no voice output, there's no auditory signal. This is a static display. It's not going anywhere when you touch it. So if you are somewhat familiar with AAC, you might have heard of a picture exchange communication system or a core vocab exchange communication system. Those are all low-tech systems because they don't have a voice output. So a mid-tech system does have voice output. It has a battery, but it's still a static display. So when you touch it, it's going to talk. It's not going to navigate to anything. It's not a dynamic display. And then we have some examples on here of high-tech systems. So these are both just iPad apps, these in particular. And so the definition of high-tech is that there is voice output, and it has dynamic display. So it might just talk when you touch it, or it might lead you to something else. That's what I mean by dynamic. It might navigate to something, and it's sort of like a computer, right? So you're probably familiar with iPad apps, and so obviously it needs to be charged. So that's what I mean by high-tech systems, okay? So I want to also just bring up that people with significant motor difficulties can access AAC. So you don't have to have a child who has very good finger isolation or dexterity or very good fine motor skills to do this. And so in this picture, these are just some examples. The person on the top right is using an eye gaze system. On the bottom right are using switches. So you can see a switch there on the right temple. So these are not, this is not something that has to be, again, accessed with fingers. This can be whatever works or whatever purposeful movement that your child has or the individual has. We can use that to access a system, okay? All right, so any AAC system should allow an individual to do these things, okay? So same things that we all want to do. We want to be able to express our wants and needs, share information, gain information. What I mean by that is I want to be able to ask questions and get information from you. So that's what I mean by information transfer. Be able to have social closeness, social etiquette. We want to be able to meet all these communicative purposes. The ultimate goal, just like in speech, just like you and I with speech, is to say exactly what you want to say. So we want to come up with a system that's matched to the child or to the individual to allow them to say exactly what they want to say as fast as possible to whoever they want to talk to whenever. Okay, so just keep all those sort of requirements in mind. We sort of, because I work primarily with children, I mean, I do have an age range of like 18 months up to 20 years, but primarily we're a pediatric practice and I am a pediatric therapist. And so we see AAC as a tool. Okay, so this is a tool for teaching and providing language, improving communication, and then my goal for all kids is to improve speech. That's my goal for all kids, but I'm aware that some kids may or may not develop speech, or if they do, maybe it's not going to be enough to meet all of their needs, or maybe it's not going to be as intelligible as it needs to be, but that's our ultimate goal. What AAC is not is a last resort, and I say this because there is, some people sometimes think that you need to do X number of years of traditional speech and language therapy before you should move into something like this. But we don't see it as a last resort. We see it as a tool at the same time in early intervention. You guys were talking about being in EI. So I was an EI provider in Illinois before I moved to Virginia, and we did this all the time. So this is not something that is a last resort. These are just a couple, I have a couple quotes on here. You guys don't have the handout, but if you want it and you want some access to these, do you? Okay, great. All right, so good. You do have access to it. Good. Okay. So who needs it? So I mentioned earlier, let's think about who this would be appropriate for. So any individuals who are non-speaking or minimally speaking. And I say minimally, and maybe there's 20 words or 15 words, but it's not enough to meet all your needs. That's what I mean by minimally speaking. Or unintelligible. They try to talk, but it's not understood. Okay, maybe some individuals who have speech and language, but it's significantly delayed for their age, or it's inadequate to meet those needs. We often have a lot of kids who use echolalia versus generative language, so that it would be appropriate for them as well. Or a diagnosis, such as you guys have been here this weekend talking about this, so a diagnosis such as this that what we know might impact speech and language, then it's good to have this on your radar screen. And that's why I was so impressed that you guys had this on your agenda today, because it's clearly on your radar screen. So that was really great. So some of the things that are possible in this population, as you know, I know you guys are the experts, not me, on SCN8A, possible developmental delay, motor challenges, ASD-like symptoms, difficulty talking or nonverbal, right? So all of these things lumped together, and this is definitely something that could help in this population. So we mentioned earlier about the American Speech and Hearing Association. And so that's our national organization here in the U.S. And so this is just a position statement from them that I really like. And so I'll just highlight some of it. I won't read all of this. But communication is the essence of human life, and all people have the right to communicate to the fullest extent possible. So I sort of see this as my job. So no individual should be denied this right, irrespective of the type or the severity of those communication needs, social, cognitive, motor, sensory, perceptual, or other disabilities present, okay? So I take this very seriously. There's something called the Communication Bill of Rights. I have a copy of it with me if anybody wants one. It's a really good read if you want to check it out. It's from the National Joint Committee for the Communication Needs of Persons with Severe Disabilities. But I want to just highlight number 9, and it says the right to access interventions and supports that improve communication. So I say this because if this is something that you are looking into for your child, I just want you to find somebody that is an expert in this. Okay, so not just any SLP. I want you to find an SLP that is an expert in this and has experience and knowledge with these types of interventions and supports. I was looking at one of the handouts that you guys have out in the back, and you know, I was looking on here where it says speech and language pathology, and it says nonverbal on here, and so that's what I was thinking when I read that, was I would just piggyback on that to say, like, not just any SLP, but someone that has that experience. Okay. So I want to talk a little bit about the process. I was mentioning that's usually the question that I get quite a bit. It's like, where do we start? How do we start this process? And so I'll talk a little bit about that process. And so Jennifer was talking earlier about school-based. She was talking about IEPs and things like that. So if your kid is already in school, what you can do is, here in the U.S., AAC falls under assistive technology. So if you have a child in the school, then you feel like this is something you want them to look at, this is one way that you could go. You could also go private, and we'll talk about that in a second. But if you want to go down the school route, you could request an assistive technology evaluation. And so here in the U.S., I know we have people listening from other countries who are here from other countries, but in the U.S., under IDEA, or Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, every IEP team or every IEP must consider assistive technology. Whether the kid needs it or not, it needs to be considered. And so if you're having an IEP meeting, this conversation should be coming up, okay? Jennifer also mentioned earlier about requesting an IEE, or an independent educational evaluation. So we commonly at our practice get requests. So parents have gone through an assistive technology evaluation at the school, and they either disagree with the results or want to get another opinion, and so they come to us for an IEE. So she mentioned that earlier. It can be specifically for AAC, so just so you know. All right, so that's one way. Another way is if you want to go the private way, and by private way I mean if you want to go through a private practice, if you want to go through a hospital-based system. So that's what I mean by private. This is more like sort of insurance side. And so what happens in that process is there's a referral to an SLP who's knowledgeable and experienced in the assessment and implementation of AAC. And in an ideal scenario, especially for you guys, would to be a team that's multidisciplinary, right? So an OT and a PT should be involved. If there are some vision concerns, perhaps someone that is knowledgeable about that. So it should be sort of a team approach, if not in that one moment, at least having everybody weigh in. Oh no, did I press something wrong? Whoops. Just kidding. Okay. So what we tend to do, and I'll just sort of talk about our, let me back up really quick. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about what we do, but generally, you know, it's going to vary site to site, it's going to vary state to state, but I want to just give you a general overview, and then you guys sort of have some baseline to go through. But there should be an extensive case history done, right? So asking parents, asking team members, just so we can get a picture of the child. What are things that have been tried? How does the child typically communicate right now? What are your goals? What are their current skills? What are their needs? Things like that. We like to do an observation in the natural environment, whether that's a video, doing an observation at home. Again, this is all going to vary a bit, but this is sort of what we do. And then we also like to do what we call a dynamic assessment. And what that means is we're basically going to get in there and try things. So based on what we see and what we think, we'll get in there and try a few different systems, try a few different methods, give a little bit of teaching, see how they do, take some data. So this is a very in-depth approach, or should be. And what we want to do is feature match. And what that means is take the skills and the needs of the kid and match that to a system. So it shouldn't be the reverse. So what's happening in today's day and age, because of accessibility of iPads and things like that, what's happening a lot of times from very well-intentioned people is, I heard about this app, or I heard about this, and I'm going to buy this iPad with this app, and then we sort of get those people coming in and say, basically make it work. But it's kind of the wrong order, right? So the order should be looking at those skills and those needs and figuring out which is a good system, not the reverse. So just sort of remember that. And so what we're trying to do in the assessment process is figure out what are the needs, or what kind of system do we need to get the kid now to meet their needs now, but also plan for the future. Obviously, we can't know everything, but we don't want a system that only meets your needs now, because we anticipate that your skills are going to grow, and we're going to get in there and teach and do that. So we're trying to get a system that's going to meet the needs now, but also for the future. So from an insurance standpoint, just so you know, I was mentioning school-based, and how school-based is looking specifically at, is it educationally relevant, educationally necessary? In the medical setting, and if we're going through insurance, they're looking at medical necessity. So we would have to write a report that says that this system or this device is medically necessary. The child needs this to indicate their medical needs, pain, hurt, those kind of things. Okay, so it's just a different approach for insurance to fund it. We have to prove that it's medically necessary. Okay, so that's a little bit of a distinction between the two. And so, again, just a little bit more information about the process. And so I mentioned if you want to go through insurance to do this, the SLP has to write a report. That's one of the main requirements, is that a report gets submitted to insurance from an SLP. We call it here a funding packet. We sort of, once we do some trials, we like to do extended trials to see if this is going to be a good match at home. And so each state is supposed to have a lending library for assistive technology that includes devices. And so I don't know about other countries, but every state is supposed to have a lending library to let you borrow things to try at home. Okay, so you'll have to find out state by state which one that is. But we do encourage families to do a trial first before we go through the funding process. And then once that happens, it gets submitted, and then it gets approved or it gets denied, and we write an appeal. So then we sort of go from there, and then we decide how to get in there and start teaching. Okay, so now we know what happens generally in an AAC evaluation. So now the question always becomes, well, when should I do this, right? So I want to talk a little bit about when this should be initiated. And so what I would say is basically as soon as you notice there's a delay. That's what I would say, as soon as you notice that there's a delay. So here's just a couple, quotes from research, some people that do this quite a bit. So one of the things, too, I would say is, I really like this first quote because it says, as soon as it's apparent that a child's communicative signals are difficult to interpret. I think that's probably more helpful than talking about, is it a delay? I'm not sure. I don't know at what point. And so if, as a parent, you feel like communicative signals are difficult to interpret, this is a good time. This is a good time to get in there. I bring this up because there are people who think that you have to wait until a kid is a certain age, and I'm suggesting that's not true, and we'll see that in just a second. But that's what I mean by this. This is a little bit of a segue for us. We're going to talk for just the next couple minutes about some myths. One of them I just mentioned was age. And so this is a nice segue. So this, I don't expect you to read all this. You'll have it in your handout. I'm not going to read you the whole thing. But this is just another position statement from ASHA, like I mentioned earlier, American Speech and Hearing Association, about the fact that there are not these prerequisites that people sometimes think there are. Here are some examples of alleged prerequisites. Chronological age, diagnosis. And what I mean by prerequisites is there are people that think there are a certain set of skills or like I said, chronological age or diagnosis that could preclude you from having access to this. And what I'm saying is there's not any prerequisites. And so we're going to see that in just a second. Has anybody ever heard anything like this, or has anyone ever told you? Can you tell me an example? Okay. Okay. Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Sure.
You know, do you just throw language at him
Mm-hmm.
like we do as with our typical kids? We just
Right.
talk to them. We just talk and they learn along the regular channels of speaking back.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, do you throw language at them with buttons and pictures and all at once or one card at a time? Right now we're very successful with one card at a time and we're moving slowly, but we're doing it.
Yeah.
But it's, you know,
yeah.
Different practitioners and different educators have different views on you must start with one picture and move across, and then others are, no, throw the whole language at them.
Yeah. So it can be a little frustrating, I think, because even within the field of speech pathology, we disagree on some of this. So it's even discussion within our own field.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so my son Leo, we threw him into a device. His physiotherapist is like, you don't wait for children to learn how to talk. You need to provide them the communication. At the time, they're trying to tell us that, you know, he has to do a one-finger press to press the button to get access to a high-tech device. But we fought for it. He got it at the age of 2. He's now 7, reading, writing sentences, and using that Dynavox. But initially, he couldn't even locate the things.
And that's what I was saying earlier. You know, you don't have to have the ability to use that little finger
So he would, you know, like sometimes, you know, he would have mishits, but then eventually things just started picking up, and he's developed full language because of the early intervention.
Great. Yeah. So that's what I wanted to sort of do is there are I call them myths, but there are, and we're going to talk about some ones that I think are really common here. So basically, I'll just say this first. There are no prerequisites for learning how to use an AAC device, okay? The only prerequisite here is that your child has the ability to make a purposeful movement. That could be with a head, that could be with a foot, that could be with an eye, that could be with a finger. Ability to make a purposeful movement is the prerequisite here. That's it. Okay, so we can get around the motor challenges and we can get around all that other stuff. And that's where our other disciplines come in, like PT and OT and vision. And that's where it's a team approach. But some common myths I just want to talk about really quick are age, cognition, joint engagement, hierarchy, that there's a hierarchy of systems that you have to master before you can get access to a high-tech one, or the idea that perhaps this is going to inhibit any sort of speech development, okay? So there are other ones out there, but I just picked these because I feel like they're the most common. All right, so we're going to talk about them just really briefly. And so I say this just as a warning, too, because, you know, as a parent, I want you to be aware and find an SLP that is not subscribing to these myths. Okay, and so that's why I wanted to give you this information here. So let's talk a little bit about age. So I already mentioned earlier, when you feel like those communicative signals are difficult to interpret, this is an appropriate time. Okay, so don't worry about, oh, she's too young, or she's too young, we should wait till a certain age. I would encourage you not to do that. So in this lit review here, this was from 2005, they did a lit review and found that none of the studies reviewed supported the idea of a minimum age requirement. So there's just no studies that support this age requirement, okay? And what I really liked about this particular article is it says on here, this finding must be shared widely beyond the AAC community. That's what we're doing here, right? So yes, we're talking about AAC, but we're sharing this beyond our own, you know, my own community as far as SLPs go, okay? All right, so the next one was cognition. Has anyone ever heard this? That perhaps, you know, you have to have this set of, you know, cognitive skills in order to do this. Some people are shaking their head. You've heard this before? Okay, so also a myth. And so what I would say here is, you know, if your kid's not talking or not talking very much, it's really hard to know their cognitive level, right? How is that possible for you to know? And so, or what they know. How are they going to demonstrate their knowledge to you? This is why this is an important tool, so we can know what they know. And so if they have difficulty communicating, you're not going to be able to know that. Now, let's say they do have learning challenges. That's okay. This is not going to preclude access to AAC either. All right, we're still going to do this. And not only that, this is what I like about this last quote up here. It says that AAC intervention for children with complex communication needs helps develop functional communication skills, promotes cognitive development, provides a foundation for literacy, and improves social communication. So let's say they do have some cognitive challenges. This is going to help. This is not something that they have to have in order to do this, okay? All right, so another one is joint engagement, and I hear this one a lot. And what I mean by joint engagement is we'll have people say, oh, well, they don't have very good joint engagement, or we're only working on joint engagement right now. And so it's okay if you have challenges with joint engagement. We're going to work on that, but we're also going to work on communication. So you don't have to, you know, only work on joint engagement by itself outside the context of communication. We're going to do both of those things, okay? And so Remember that too. Going back to there's not a prerequisite for this. This is another one. This is not a prerequisite. We're going to keep working on those things. In fact, there's a lot of a lot of research out there on joint engagement. In fact, let me go back to this one really quick. And this one was talking about a study they did that was a specific joint engagement intervention, but what they did was they introduced a communication device, a speech generating device, a high-tech one, and the interventionist didn't ask the kid to use it at all. They just used it themselves. So they just provided that aided language stimulation at the same time as working on this joint engagement intervention, and the results were very good for that group that incorporated that speech generating device. Again, no demand on the kid, just the interventionist was the one modeling, okay? All right, so another myth out there is that there's this hierarchy. So that's what we just mentioned a minute ago. And what I mean by hierarchy is an idea that a kid has to master a certain thing before we can give them access to a higher tech one. So you have to master a low tech before I'll give you a high. You have to master this symbol set before I give you another one. That's what I mean by a hierarchy. There's no evidence to support that at all. There's no evidence to support the use of a hierarchy in terms of a system or in a symbol set. In fact, we have the opposite. So if that's being said, and it is being said out there, what I usually just say in those moments is, so this is a policy. Okay, it's not based on evidence, so this is a policy, right? This is like, your district requires this, so that's your district policy. That's not coming from the evidence base. That's not coming from research. Do you have a comment?
I just wanted to say that with my daughter,
Mm-hmm.
we were told that she had cards, and after she would put them, like, no interest,
Mm-hmm.
didn't register. But we were able to figure out she can read. She can read, but she will not use the text card.
Mm-hmm.
And no one would give us
Until she mastered that one.
right.
Right.
So what she doesn't understand, but
Yeah.
read full sentences.
Right. Yeah, that's a perfect example. Right. It's like you have to fit this, what our policy says before we can get access to the next one. Yeah. In fact, I really like this quote here from this article here, because this one talks about in the context of moving from a very simple system into a more complex and on and on and on, and sort of moving through this process. This one says, we argue that the practice of starting with simple technologies and switching to unrelated complex devices later in life may negatively affect language development. Because every time you change, you're changing the system, and you're changing what it says in here, you're preventing development of fluency and impacting short-term memory function. Changing the locations every single time affects the lexical representation that have been developed with that system, and now you have another one. Okay, so that's what we mean. That's what I mean by that. And then people like to talk about symbol sets too. So what does this symbol mean to you? What do you think this means? Just throw out what you think it might mean. Nothing. Okay. Yeah. Any other thoughts? Or you think it might represent? So this is from, what's that? Yeah, so this is a particular symbol set, and what I mean by symbol set is, like, there are lots of symbol sets out there to represent words. What's that? So this one is one symbol set, and this is for the word on. So you can kind of see it, it's fine, yeah. But my point is, all symbol sets take learning, right? Just like the alphabet, that's a symbol set. They all take learning. And so basically our job is to teach these, but what I'm saying is I don't want there to be this, again, this hierarchy that, like, you have to understand, or the insinuation that, you're not going to get access to maybe some multiple meaning symbols or some more abstract symbols because we don't know that you have the cognitive skills for that. You see what I mean? So this is where some of this comes in. And so we're going to talk in a minute about what's truly important, but I just want to show that as an example of, symbol sets. They're all arbitrary, including the alphabet. So they all take learning. And so one of the last myths that we always hear is that I don't want to introduce AAC because it might inhibit their speech development. This is another one that's very common. We hear this a lot, but again, there's absolutely no evidence to support this, that AAC inhibits speech development. In fact, we have the opposite. We often see an increase in speech attempts, regardless of how intelligible that might be. We sometimes see, anecdotally, I've seen this quite a bit. And so if someone says this to you, oh, it's going to keep them from talking, that's not true. That's not found anywhere. So the takeaway from this section is your kid is not too anything. They're not too young, too old, too busy, too disengaged, whatever. They're not too anything to do this. We can find a system that meets their needs now and then plan for the future. Okay, questions so far? Yes.
So it's not that I was told these myths, it's that I just wasn't told anything. My son is has a lot of developmental delays, doesn't speak, I mean, could barely hold his head up or anything.
Okay.
He moves his arms a little. Right now with speech, I guess they're concentrating more on getting him to swallow again, and it's more like oral motor.
Yeah.
So you're saying even someone like him can benefit from this.
Yes.
And so it's more of me talking with his speech therapist and requesting.
Yeah, in addition to working on the swallowing, in addition to working on the motor stuff that you're doing, because it sounds like there's a swallowing issue too and feeding.
Right.
So in addition to that,
So right now, like at least as far as, so I have 2 speech therapists, one that I pay because no one wanted to work on him. Everyone was afraid of, the aspiration. She got him to start swallowing right away, like almost immediately. Now I finally found a company that was willing to work with him, but the company through the insurance is only covering like 30 minutes. If we were to get something like this, can this push the time more so that there's a little bit for the oral motor and a little bit more for the speech?
I think it just depends. Like, are you here in the U.S.?
Yes.
Okay. So I think it depends on the state. I think it depends on your region. Insurance policy, there's a bunch of different factors.
Insurance,
Exactly, yeah. So to answer that question, it's hard to say.
I understand.
But certainly it's something that you should be definitely looking at.
Okay.
So however that works out as far as getting, additional time, I don't know. But.
And so ideally my SLP should know what this all is. Like if I say, hey, I want to start with an AAC device for my son.
But not all SLPs are specialists in this. Similar in the way that I'm not a specialist in stuttering. I'm not a specialist in feeding and swallowing.
Okay.
So we all have a same general background as far as what we get in our graduate training and things like that. And so we have such a wide scope. And then what tends to happen after we sort of get out and into the field, we sort of pick some specialty areas perhaps that we're more interested in. And so I would encourage you to find an SLP that has that as a clinical interest.
Okay.
Because they'd be more knowledgeable, perhaps went to more continuing ed, things like that.
Okay, thank you so much.
When I asked about this too, I think it's a Medicaid thing too, possibly, is that you have to be evaluated by a special place. And so, like in our hometown, I do not think we have an actual evaluation area that can do that. So we would have to drive to St. Louis or Columbia or something like that to get that evaluation. And then it made it sound like that they probably would have to trial it, loaner, and see how it works before
it's a good idea to trial it. Most insurance companies will ask for a trial, but even if they don't, I think it's a good idea to do a trial, meaning like, you feel like this one might be a good fit, and let's take it home and let's trial it and let's take some data and let's decide if we think that's going to be a good fit for everybody. So you should definitely do a trial.
So it might be a little tricky trying to find someone if you're in a smaller area that is specializing in it, but she was able to get me to someone that I could talk to.
Yeah, and that might be a good route to go. Ask some SLPs in your area, like who do you know, or are there specialty sites? Right. Exactly. Right. And like you wouldn't want me doing that. So that's what I mean. Like you need to find somebody that's like, this is my area, this is what I'm knowledgeable in, this is what I'm passionate about. That's who I'd find. Yeah, absolutely. Okay.
It's very basic, just with 9 pictures on it. We're still in the very beginning stages. But where we go for therapy, speech therapist is not a specialist in devices, but they do have one. And so they will schedule appointments for us to see him if we have any special needs that we have met with his device, if we have any questions. So we don't have for that and talk to us about it. This long, I guess, trying for sign language, this long with PECs, and all of those failed. And then the trial with the device itself, he had to spend at least 2 or 3 months with a trial. So that is another issue. It might
absolutely.
not be just
Yeah, obviously, like we can talk about, you know, best case scenario, but you're right, we're always running into roadblocks as far as like my policy says I have to do this, or there's an insurance company that always requires a trial and then just out and out, you know, sort of denies it anyway. So yeah, there's lots of different challenges. And depending on your funding source and your insurance and your state and yeah, there's a lot. Okay, so just really quickly, because I know we're short on time, I want to just talk a little bit about things that I think are important elements in a system. Okay, so whatever system that might be, these are what I think are important elements. Okay, and then we'll, let me just look ahead here, then we'll probably have some more time for questions, and then we'll probably wrap up. So just really quickly, so things that I think are important in a system. Core vocabulary. Is anybody familiar with core vocabulary or what that word means? Okay, what I mean when I say core vocabulary is high frequency words. So in English, you and I use about 350 to 400 words 80% of the time. So we recycle a very small set of words. And then the other 20% are sort of context specific, right? So like tends to be nouns like volcano and cookie and that kind of stuff. So I think what's really good vocabulary targets for you and to what to have in your system is to have something that's based on core vocabulary. Okay, so that's what I mean by that. You can look that up. There's a lot of research on that. So Google that. What those tend to be are verbs, descriptors, prepositions, pronouns, lots of different parts of speech, not just nouns. Okay, nouns tend to be that other 20%. And so I also want to make sure that there is sufficient vocabulary to express a range of functions. So I don't want a system to only allow a child to request things. I want them to have access to words that will let them protest and comment and question. So all of these other reasons why we communicate, okay? Yes, we want them to say no. And so we want them to be able to protest in an appropriate way. I think a system should be linguistically robust. And what I mean by that is have the ability to create a grammatically correct sentence, even if I don't need that right now. Okay, so I might make it more simple, but I do want a system that has that capability because as I mentioned before, I don't want to just meet the needs for now. I want to have things in place for later too, okay, as our language skills grow, which is the goal of our therapy. And then, whoops, let me go back. The other thing I think is really important is the use of consistent and unique motor plans. And what I mean by that is when you have words on a system, they should not move. So it should stay in a stable location so they can rely on motor planning to develop that automaticity and know that if I want you to push me on the swing, if I want to say go for you to push me on the swing, I shouldn't have to consistently keep looking and searching for that word. It should be in the same spot, okay? And that's what I mean by that. And that's what I meant, I sort of alluded to earlier, and I was talking about the symbol and how, you know, I showed you that symbol and I said, what does this mean to you? So the symbol is less important than you think. What's more important is that that symbol, regardless of how abstract it seemed to you, has a stable, consistent location, and what happens when they touch it, that natural response that they get, that consequence, those are more important than the symbol itself. Okay, so the motor plan and the reinforcer are more important than the symbol. And then lastly, I really want kids to have auditory feedback. So meaning I want them to have a system that has voice output. I want them to get the convergence of that motor when they touch it or however they access it with the auditory feedback, hearing the word, with your response or with whoever else's response. I want them to have all that convergence of sensory input and all those like convergent neurons firing at the same time. Okay, does that make sense? And the one thing else I would just add here too is, you know, children that have a seizure disorder, children that have epilepsy often have good days and bad days, especially right after a seizure, right? So it might be a bad couple days right after the seizure, or they might look, you know, at their peak performance, it's been a couple weeks, you know, and so I've seen this myself with kids that have seizure disorders, and so I would just encourage you to make sure that you have a system that works on a good day and works on a bad day. Okay, so I don't want you to have a system that is so simplified that on a bad day this is what we need, but then on a good day it's too simple. Does that make sense? So make sure you have a system that's working on those good days and bad days. All right, and so one more slide and then we'll just wrap up here because I know we're going short, but I think it's important to have a system that is single word based. And what I mean by that is as opposed to a system that is based largely on phrases. And what I mean by that is you touch a button and it says an entire sentence. I really want kids to have systems that are based on single words because I want them to hear that word separate from another word. I don't want it to be heard as a chunk. Not only that, it's really hard for them to start to put words together in generative and flexible ways if they're not accessible separately. Does that make sense? So I don't want them to have only access to, you know, I need, because then what if I want to say something else with I, like I, Amy, or I go, or I do, or I hate, or I like. You see what I mean? I want access to single words. That's what I mean by that. And I don't want them to have a system that requires literacy, but promotes literacy. Okay, so you shouldn't have to have literacy skills in order to use the system, but it should be something that allows you to see those sight words as they pop up, or to have access to a keyboard that has letters and things like that. So that's what I mean by that. All right, and so I'm just going to skip these last ones. Obviously, we want family acceptance and buy-in. That's why I meant the trial, and want you guys part of therapy. And so I'm going to skip over the parts that talk about intervention strategies. You'll see them in the handout when you get that. But if you guys have any other questions, should we just do questions now? Okay. Okay, great. Any other questions or comments, or even just thoughts? Yeah. I think I have my favorites, but everybody is different, and I want it to be very highly individualized. So that's going to be different for everybody. So, but to your point about a good day and a bad day, you know, making sure it's a system that can be sort of tweaked as needed, you know, or have the ability to, like, you know, maybe on a bad day, maybe, or you know, with a kid that has CDI perhaps or something like that, maybe I need to hide some of those things because of the visual clutter. I think Jennifer was talking about that earlier, about her son having to hide some things. So maybe on those days we need to hide more things, and maybe on a good day they're all open. You see what I mean? So just making sure there's a system available for that, and then, you know, it's going to depend on each kid and what their needs are and their skills are, and then again, matching that to the system. So it kind of, it's not an easy answer, it depends. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so as long as, so she's asking about like the person who does the assessment versus the person who's doing the intervention and the treatment. So I would say that you should have somebody, both the assessor and the person who's doing your therapy, that's knowledgeable. So while the assessment, person who does the assessment, you know, is very knowledgeable, you should find a treating SLP if you're going to work with this and work on implementation, who also is knowledgeable in this particular area. Yeah, so maybe they could recommend somebody, you know, when you go to if you go to an assessment site or something like that, maybe they have a network of, you know, so yes. Right, absolutely. Right. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, great. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And that reminds me actually of something I meant to say earlier, which is, especially with a group that has, you know, similar challenges, but it's also a really relatively small group, right? 100, I think. So what I would like to say too is that there are some other groups out there, you know, individuals with, you know, different types of syndromes or different type of diagnosis, and I want to just make sure that it's like highly individualized. So just because, you know, all of the kids have this gene mutation, it's going to vary in its presentation, its severity, and so make sure that it's like a person is looking at it directly just on their specific, you know, your child's specific skills and needs, you know. And I only say that as a word of caution because I think groups can sometimes, you know, think like, well, my kid's using this one, so everybody thinks like, oh, my kid has the same diagnosis, I should use this one. Just making sure that it's very highly individualized. So, any other questions? Yes. Okay. 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 Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. yeah, so there's a lot of different, systems out there. There's a lot of different apps out there. So it kind of, it depends specifically. I mean, you could ask somebody to look specifically at that, maybe meet with someone, say, these are the communication challenges that I'm seeing. Like, is there something that could help her with this from a technology standpoint? It's possible. Yep. Yeah. Any other thoughts or questions? My email is on the handout. When you get access to that, my email's on the last slide. So if you have any questions, feel free to email me. Oh, great. Okay. Yep. So my email's on there. Okay, great. Thank you. Is my pen? No, I think that's my pen. Oh, you're welcome. Yeah.
All right, thank you so much, Amy. Okay, next up we have Dr. Ryan Uwe. Dr. Uwe recently joined Children's National Health System as a developmental and behavioral pediatrician, with faculty appointment as assistant professor in Department of Pediatrics in the George Washington University School of Medicine. He completed his fellowship training in developmental and behavioral pediatrics from Cincinnati Children's Hospital Medical Center. During that time, he also managed to complete a master's in public health degree and training with a federally funded program, LEND, or Leadership Education in Neurodevelopmental and Other Disabilities. He has given numerous talks and presentations in various platforms about his work with children with special healthcare needs. He has a brother with Down syndrome, which inspired him to pursue and be passionate about his field of specialty. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. So good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for having me here. And I just want to say that I'm really thrilled to be in front of you guys. When I came about this group, I was thoroughly impressed because, I mean, you have the clinicians, researchers, and family all together in the stakeholders, and I don't see that a lot with other conditions. So yeah, I'm really excited. So as mentioned, I'm a developmental and behavioral pediatrician, so I know my topic is kind of broad. I mean, development, basically speech, motor, cognitive, social skills, and then the behavior aspect of it. So I kind of see a lot of issues, ADHD, autism, school problems, learning problems, so basically a lot of things. So I do want to proceed and kind of get through. I know there's a lot of topics that I'm going to cover, just because when I reach out to Maggie and ask for like specific topics to give, I got a lot of different ideas, and so I wanted to kind of at least touch on those things. So yeah. So just an overview of what I'm going to be talking about. So just general development and behavior, and then mostly tips and strategies on how to improve communication, speech and language, and some cognitive skills. And then I'll be touching a little bit about autism and functions of behavior. And so as an introduction, I think you already saw this slide from Amy, the previous one. So we also did our research on what SCN8 related epilepsies are, because again, as mentioned, it's a relatively small field, and to be honest, I've never had a patient with that. But again, some of the features of children with this condition is that they might have some physical and intellectual disability. The intellectual disability ranges from mild to severe. And then they have a very varied presentation. So they might have developmental delays, some might have regression, some might have just slowing. And then in terms of motor, they might have hypotonia, movement disorder. And then for the speech and language, again, it has a very varied presentation. So some might be verbal, some might not be verbal. And then I also came across this autism-like features in some. I tried to look more specifically about what they were saying about autism-like features, but they did not really elaborate on that. So I'll be kind of touching that, and I'd be curious to know also what the autism-like features are from you guys. But yeah. And then, so as for the general development, as you know, development may be unequal for a lot of kids, right? And so they might have some strengths non-verbally, or they might have better receptive language than their expressive language. So it's not always equal. And then children acquire and pass through different stages of development at their own pace. So that's why we always tell parents not to, I mean, it's easy to compare them to other kids, but that's the reason why we usually don't want to compare them as well. And then they have different strengths and weaknesses. And what we always tell parents is that we always have to capitalize on those strengths to work on their weaknesses. And then inconsistencies in using the skills that they have. So as mentioned by Amy, there are some good days. They might be using their words on a good day, and on a bad day, they're not wanting to use their words. And so speech and language development, broadly, they have two components. Actually, there is a third one. So the major ones are the expressive, or the way they communicate with you, and the one is receptive, or the way they understand or comprehend what you're saying. And then the third one is the pragmatics, or the social piece. But I'll be talking about that separately later. And so as we know, language and communication is key for all relationships. And so personally, and I think all developmental and pediatricians would agree, that we place heavy emphasis on speech and language. Usually when we prioritize things, we always push for speech and language therapy, just because speech and language impacts learning, behavior, and they also impact relationships, right? And so a lot of times we see patients in our clinic with behavior issues, and most of them have speech issues as well, because just imagine if they can't communicate to you what they want, what they need, they're easily frustrated. And so therefore, we find adaptive ways for them to communicate. And so I think this was mentioned by the previous speaker, Amy. So in order for kids to effectively communicate, there has to have two conditions, right? So one is that children must have a reason to communicate. So it should be rewarding, it should be motivating for them, right? Because if they don't have any incentive to talk, why would they even try to speak? If you kind of give them right away what they want without them asking for it, it's like, oh, I don't have to request for it anymore. And then the next one is they have to have means to communicate. So that's what Amy was saying, the previous speaker, about AAC. So giving them a way. So it's not just text, but it could also be pointing, gesturing, eye gaze, picture exchange, AAC, so or words. So anything that they can use to convey their message. And so visual supports are critical and important. As we know, visual supports are concrete, meaning it's tangible, they can see it, and it's absorbed visually. And as we know, kids who are not able to talk have a particular strength with their visual or nonverbal skills. And as we know, visual supports are stable over time, meaning a picture of an apple is an apple forever, right? It only means one thing. And it attracts and holds attention. So colors, shapes, those kind of catch their attention. And then they also make concepts more concrete, as mentioned. So we deal with a lot of abstract things day to day, but picture gives them like a concrete thing. And then lastly, it's good for prompting technique, right? So if you just kind of point to the picture, it kind of gives them a set point, like, oh, this is where I need to start, and then kind of move there. And so visual supports cover a wide range of needs. So understanding rules, so you can see on the top right, they have to sit in a chair, they have to participate in a circle time, or they have to line up, or hands on their lap. So it kind of gives them a cue on the rules or the norms, or like the rules. And then it also promotes increasing independence. So for example, give them a routine at night. So they have, or in the morning, so they have to brush their teeth, they have to take a bath, take a shower, they have to brush their hair, get dressed for school. So it kind of gives them some independence that, yeah, I can do this myself. Just give me some guide on how to proceed. And then making decisions. So you can offer or make some choice, ask them to make some choices. So you show them picture and let them pick. So again, as you know, kids love to be independent, that they strive to be, like they want to do it for themselves. And then also how to request and express their needs. So you give them, I want blank. So you have them pick, do they want a car, a toy, or go out, or something like that. And then providing organization, supporting transitions, offering positive feedback. So you can see down there the star charts. So again, it gives them a visual representation of like if they collect a star each day that they're behaving, then that's something that, oh, I'm actually racking stars, right? Because it's not good for you to say, okay, if you behave for the 5 day or a week without giving them a visual kind of support, it's kind of, they tend to forget about it. And so we always encourage parents to like put up a visual star reward chart on a refrigerator or something that they see every day, and so that they can see actually how much they're earning. And then also it diminishes challenging behaviors. As mentioned, it decreases tantrums. And so, And so some tips and ideas that you guys can do at home to encourage speech and language development. Again, these might sound very simple, but I think obviously there's a lot of value in it. So first is imitating your child. So obviously when they make sounds, if you try to imitate them, they will catch your attention, right? And so whenever you're trying to roll a car or do something, or like flying a car, you try to do that as well, so that they know that you're kind of seeing them and that you're acknowledging them. Obviously, copy only the positive behaviors. If they start throwing cars, you don't want to do that as well. But yeah, so it encourages child to copy you and take turns. And then using the nonverbal communication as well. So as mentioned, it's not just words. So we use pointing, gesturing, and eye gaze. So I always encourage parents to exaggerate sometimes, like nod your head saying yes or no, right? Rather than just saying yes or no, you kind of pair that with a big gesture or pointing. So like instead of saying look, kind of try to exaggerate your whole body so that your child knows that, oh, his body, like his whole body turned. Again, it catches their attention. And then leave some space for your child to talk. So I know it's natural instinct for us to fill in the gap, or like we don't want any dead air. But sometimes giving them an opportunity to talk is good. So sometimes just look at them, and as soon as they give any action or said or any action or words, like acknowledge them right away so that they know that they're being heard, that they're being acknowledged. And then simplify the language. So help kids follow what you're saying. And then I have this one-up rule that I usually tell parents as well. So if a patient is nonverbal, you try to kind of use one word. So kind of always go one step further of what your child can do. So if they're nonverbal, if they're rolling a car, say car, so that they can kind of try to see if they'll imitate you. Or if they're saying single words, then go one step beyond and use short phrases. So if you see them rolling a car and they're able to say car, you say, let's say a yellow car, or like a blue car, or like a car moving. So something like that. And then you basically just increase what your child can do. So basically go one step ahead all the time. And then the next one is follow your child's interest. So reflect and narrate what your child is doing. Oftentimes, as adults, we usually ask, if we enter a room and our child is like coloring or something, our usual instinct is like, what are you doing, right? Or what's that? So we usually ask them what they're doing, or we try to kind of participate with them by asking questions. It's actually not that good if you think about it, because sometimes some kids might feel judged, like, oh, am I doing something wrong? Or sometimes they can't tell you what they're doing, right? But rather, we kind of need to reflect and kind of just narrate what they're doing. So if they're coloring, like, for example, let's see, a dog, you say, oh, you're coloring the dog with a color blue. So it's a non-threatening way. You basically you're not putting pressure on them. So you're basically just telling them what they're doing. Or say, oh, you're putting a princess on top of a tower, or something like that. So it's more of like reflecting. You're validating them, you're supporting them with what they're doing, and they kind of feel encouraged to do more. Yeah.
I was going to add that I
Yeah.
noticed with Stella that it takes her extra long to talk whatever I'm saying.
Exactly.
And as I keep talking,
Exactly.
even if it's the same word. So, for example, she has this little card that she can activate with
Mm-hmm.
And so we would say, Stella, go, even though we were making small words.
Right.
Every time I said go, she had to stop and process what I was saying.
What did you say?
So
Yeah.
if I just said it once and then didn't say a thing and let her process it, then she was hitting that button.
Right.
But the more I said it,
It just confuses them.
she was like, oh, more stuff.
Exactly.
Concentrate on pressing
Exactly.
buttons because she's talking to me again.
Exactly.
So we really had to step back, and I'm a talker, so I had to really restrain myself. Giving her very short, simple
Exactly.
words, and then let her process.
Exactly. Just, yeah, wait for, leave the space, yeah, exactly, for them to do. And then as soon as they do it, comment right away, like, good job pushing that button so that they're, exactly. All right. And then make them work for objects. Again, as parents, we tend to just give them right away what they want to prevent tantrums and disappointments. But sometimes make them work for it, right? So that they try and see what they're capable of doing. Are they going to point? Are they going to grab your hand? Are they going to use their words to say open or something like that, rather than just you instinctively giving it right away without giving them the opportunity to work for it. And then engage in fun play routines several times. So actually wait for the child to reinitiate the routine. So for example, if you're tickling each other, so it's your turn and then his turn, your turn, his turn. So see if he'll do it and reinitiate the routine. So like peekaboo or bubbles. So those are the kind of situations where you want to see if they're going to actually do what you're doing, right? All right. And so now we proceed to cognitive development. So cognition or cognitive function is how a child learns or acquires knowledge and interacts with the surrounding environment. So it's the child's ability to process information, to learn new concepts and skills, and language. And so cognitive development occurs in tandem with language, specifically receptive language. So a lot of times in my clinic, again, I always say it's actually, like, again, between having an expressive delay or a receptive delay, I'd rather have an expressive delay because receptive usually is linked with the cognition. So even if a kid is not talking or have weaker expressive language delay, as long as the receptive language is far advanced, then that's better, right? And we always need to talk with kids with reasoning-based or refined analysis so that we teach the child to reason and analyze. And so exercising thinking skills is not the same as acquiring information. So don't just add content. So what I mean is, for example, if you're drilling, not drilling, if you're showing a flashcards to a kid, A, B, C, D, or if you're teaching them letters. So that's more of giving them knowledge, but you're actually not providing them structure, right? So if you're basically asking them to memorize the letters or the words without doing anything else, then you're basically giving them knowledge, but you're not actually asking them to think more. That makes sense. So we encourage comprehension, or why did this happen, or what happened, analysis, or breaking down information, and synthesis, kind of putting together information or evaluating, right? So some ideas to improve cognitive skills. So sing-alongs are really good. So play their favorite song in the car or in the house and see if they'll try to sing along with it or kind of at least hum with it. So this promotes memory, right? Because they know what's going to happen next, or what's the next word that's going to be in the song, and it teaches them word identification. Identifying noises, so birds chirping or like the dishwasher or a car horn. It teaches them that sounds are related to objects, right? numbers and alphabets and colors and shapes, those are pre-academic skills. And then offering choices. So do you want to wear a brown pants or a blue pants today? Do you want cheese or yogurt for lunch? So these are the things that kind of make them kind of think, and it gives them, again, independence, like they feel that they're empowered. And then visiting interesting places. So obviously this gives them, this stimulates their curiosity. So, oh, there's like a museum, like it's not just my house, that there are a lot of other places, parks. It gives them a hands-on experience of, oh, there's a lot of things outside my house, right? And then engage them in a variety of games. So peekaboo, building blocks, board games, puzzles, hide and seek. So it encourages them problem solving. So like puzzles, and then in creativity, and then sorting and matching as well. So that works with coordinating the visual and motor skills. So they need to know first that this, like if you group them or if you match based on colors, so that actually is a good cognitive skill to have. So matching and sorting. And then, yeah, so as mentioned, puzzles stimulates problem solving. Memory games is a good one too. So as we know, memory games, we have to kind of put that in our short-term memory, and then we have to recall it and say, oh, where was that again? So it kind of builds that skill. And then the verbal games. So this is good when you're in a car. So just say inventory questions. So for example, what did we have for dinner last night? Make them recall again. Or like, guess what? Guess what has 4 legs and a long nose. So kind of, again, make them think, make them kind of just kind of, yeah, so think and use their kind of cognitive skills. And then playing charades, simple charades, or board games as well. So yeah, so some more ideas for cognitive skills. So we know that preschool kids love to do their own way, right? And sometimes we may not agree, but sometimes allowing them to commit mistakes is okay, especially if it's not harmful. So say, for example, they don't want to wear their jacket on a cold day. On a cold day, let them go out and not have a jacket, and let them realize that, oh, mom was right that I need to put on a jacket, rather than insisting that, no, you have to put a jacket. So again, obviously it's not harmful. So you just let them be and kind of figure them out themselves that, oh, mom was right, I had to wear a jacket. So something like that. And then work on a project from start to end. So for example, if you want to prepare a food, right? So have them check the pantry and see if you have all the ingredients, and then make them list or kind of ask them what the ingredients are, what you guys need to do, and then bring them to the store and have them pick them up with you and then prepare. So I know it's tedious, but it's a good way to kind of teach them that with every activity or project, there has to be a start and a finish, and you have to guide, and you're there to guide them. And then, or crafts as well. And then ask questions. So what do we do next? Or what should you do? So for example, if the light came out, what do we do now? Kind of, again, make them kind of think what are possible ways. So do we need a flashlight, candle, or anything, or other source of light, or see what happened? Was there a chip in the circuit or something like that? So again, asking questions so that it stimulates their kind of critical thinking. And then it teaches them to think before they act. And it gives you an insight of what their thought process are, right? You might be amazed of what you might figure out that your kid's thinking. And so now I move on to autism spectrum disorder. So autism spectrum disorder is a triad of these 3 things. So the core feature of autism is that they have to have impairment in socialization, and then they have impairments in their social communication, and then they have a restricted or repetitive interests or behavior or mannerism. A lot of times we see in clinic that some of the kids might have some of them, but not all of them, and they kind of jump into the idea of, oh, my kid might have autism. And so this is a good framework that I always use. And so again, there's a lot of conditions out there that might appear autism. So ADHD, anxiety, language problem, intellectual disability, learning disorder, aggression, and so on. But again, as mentioned, autism has to have the three big components of it. And as you can see from the graph, like if there's social impairment and there's repetitive behavior, maybe they're just anxious. They don't have problems with communicating socially. So it's not autism, it's primarily anxiety. Or on the other side, if a patient has intellectual disability, they might not have that social means to communicate, and they might have some repetitive restricted disorder, but in terms of socialization or interaction, they interact with you. They crave that attention, right? So it's not autism. So I think my point is there's a lot of different conditions out there that might look autism. And so just a few comments about that is always look at the bigger picture. So we don't really focus on, oh, he was slapping his hand. Oh, that must be autism right away. Or he's not looking at me. That's autism right away. So we have to kind of step back and look at the bigger picture. And then consider other conditions as well. And then consider their developmental age, not their chronological age. So again, a child might be 10 years old, but developmentally they're a 2-year-old or a 3-year-old. So we can't expect them to be talking back and forth or sharing stories, right? Though, again, chronologically they might be 10, but developmentally they're a 2 or a 3. And regardless of the labels, we must focus on the treatment. So if a child needs a speech therapy or they have problems with communication, regardless if it's a language delay, autism, or speech impediment or articulation disorder, the kid needs speech therapy. So again, a lot of patients that I see in clinic hung on to the labels and diagnosis, and they kind of lose focus. And I always say, let's focus on what we can do now, regardless of what we call it. If the kid needs speech therapy, if they need supports through school, that's what we're going to give them. That makes sense. And so in terms of social development, I think I remember hearing this from Amy again, the joint attention or joint engagement. So it's the ability of a person to share attention with another one at the same object. So for example, a child sees an airplane, right? Typically, children would kind of get your attention to look at the object or the airplane that she finds interesting. And so that's kind of joint attention. And these are the things that we usually ask for kids if they have concerns for autism, because usually kids with autism usually has decreased joint attention. So they would just look at that object and maybe label that, but they don't try to engage you as a parent to look at that, what they're seeing is interesting. And so imitation as well is a very simple type of social play, right? So I always ask this to parents as well, like, do they imitate you when you're cooking or imitate you with your household chores? So usually, as you know, kids like to imitate because they want to see if you're seeing them. So when you use a vacuum cleaner, sometimes they might try to imitate you or wipe the table or wash the dishes. So imitation is an important kind of social skill that a kid. And then clapping, dancing, using the rattle, and puppets, those are types of imitation. And then moving on to imaginative and creative play. So again, this is a hierarchy. So cause and effect toys are good, but I usually don't want to encourage parents to keep on buying cause and effect toys because it's just very simple. So you basically turn on a switch, it gives you a sound or a light, that's it. So kids with autism kind of turn on and off, but it's not giving them anything else to work with. So usually I encourage parents to buy, again, it's not, so they can have some cause and effect toys, but kind of move out of that. And then moving on to simple toys, so cars and blocks. So we're teaching kids that they can manipulate those toys because the cause and effect, basically they turn on and off the switch, right? But in terms of simple toys, so when you have a car can go back and forth, they can go to the tracks, they can fly, so they can do a lot of things with that. And then the next level would be creative or imaginative play. So again, so kids with autism sometimes have this characteristic lining up of toys or objects because for them it's very simple. right? They don't have to use any imagination. They basically line up toys. They don't know what else to do with that toy. But again, if you kind of do the one-up rule, so you line up toys and then you do a simple track, like back and forth, and then you make it more complicated with like different, so you can put stops in there, and then sometimes, again, flying cars. So those are kind of ways on how to increase or up the ante. And then the next level of play, as I mentioned, is creative or imaginative play. So using objects to represent something that is not. So for example, I asked that too when I asked for specifically for autism. So sometimes using a box, a tissue box as a phone. So we know that the box is not a phone, but we can put meaning to it. We can say, hello, is there someone? Versus kids who take things very literal. So a car is a car, they can never fly. Or like a phone is a phone, a box can never be a phone. So those are the things that you put basically meaning to it. So are they creative? Do they think creatively? And then gradually introduce peers. So sometimes kids might tolerate parallel play, meaning I play here and you play there, and we don't interact at all. And then gradually introduce a playmate, like one playmate or two playmates at a time, and then gradually kind of introduce them to a bigger crowd. All right, so now we move on to behavior. So parents often have difficulty kind of telling the difference between a normal behavior and a behavior that's not typical, right? And in reality, the difference is really hard to tell. It's basically a matter of parents' expectation and the degree of the behavior. And so, as I mentioned, always consider the developmental age of the patient rather than their chronological age. And so, again, a kid might whine and cry. Again, for a 5-year-old kid, for example, they might whine and cry, which should not be typical. But if they're developing at a 2-year-old or a 3-year-old level, then that's expected. And so we kind of always have to balance our expectations of our kids. Again, we have to always consider their developmental level. And then we have to understand that a child's unique developmental progress, and it's necessary in order to interpret and accept their behavior. And then, as we know, child have a great variety of temperament, development, and behavior. And so we should always remember that. So there's 3 types of behavior. So obviously the desirable or appropriate that we want them to or encourage them to do. And then there's one that's neither good or bad. So for example, if the child is sick and he's whiny, that's okay because he's sick, or there's a calamity and they start regressing or something like that. And it's not necessarily bad, but it's not necessarily good as well. And then there's the undesirable or inappropriate behavior, meaning those are the ones that we want to decrease or eliminate or replace at all costs. And so now I move on to behavioral management. So some theories in practice. So we know that in order for us to remove the negative or inappropriate behavior, we have to replace it with something else. Because otherwise it will just, if you try to prevent the undesirable behavior, it'll just morph into something else that's probably negative as well. And that behaviors are learned through time. And so when we are able to learn it, then that means that we are also able to unlearn it, right? But it takes time. And understanding what behavior is problematic does not give us anything else. So I always see this in clinic as well. So a mom comes in and says the child is hitting or screaming or spitting or pulling hair. It's good to know what the behavior is, but I actually want to know what's causing the behavior. Because again, child A might kick and scream in response to being told no, but then another child might respond to crying when told no. So both of them have the same reason for it when they're told no, but their behavior is very different. And so that's why I kind of tell parents, like, it doesn't really give me anything if you tell me what they're doing, but I actually want to know what's the cause of that behavior. So I'm going to be going through more in detail about that later on. But so why the behavior occurs is very important, and not necessarily the what is the behavior. And so that's what we call function of the behavior. So what why does the behavior persist? So what environmental events that maintain the problematic behavior? And that's what we're focusing on. And treatment is based on the identified function and not the behavior itself. So again, as mentioned, hitting, crying, screaming, stomping feet, falling to the ground, it doesn't really matter. What matters is how we can prevent that from happening again. So we have to know what the underlying reason is. So that's why, yeah, these pictures, we're focused on the function rather than the form of the behavior. So there are just four major functions of behavior. So one is attention seeking. So pretty explanatory, right? Is the kid wanting your attention? That's why they're screaming, they're kicking, they're tantruming. So it could be either verbal or nonverbal, or physical or nonverbal. And then the next one is tangible, meaning they want something, they want to get it now, right? So if they don't get it now, or if you tell them no, that's when they tantrum. And then the third one is escape behavior, or they don't want to do what you're telling. So if you tell them, Johnny, clean up your toys, and then they start crying or tantruming, that means that they don't want to do what you're telling them. So they want to escape that. Or if a teacher tells them, okay, we need to answer problems 1, 2, 3, and then they start crying. So that means that they want to get away from that task. And then the last one is automatic, meaning it could be sensory, it could be blocking or pain. So for example, a kid might have an earache, so they bang their heads because they want to mask that pain. So that's something internal. So this is one of the harder functions to kind of identify because it's not obvious. So again, so kids with autism have that sensory issue inside that they just need to do it. Again, tapping their hands. It's not because they want to escape behavior, they're trying to get your attention, but it's something internal. So yeah. And so how do you figure out the function of the behavior? So you kind of have to step back and again, not focus on the behavior itself, but what are the surrounding events or environment that you see that behavior. So what was the individual trying to accomplish? Was he trying to escape? Was he trying to get your attention? When, where, in what situation or setting does the behavior commonly occur? Does it only occur in school? Does it only occur at home? Both? Everywhere? And what did the individual get in response to that behavior? Did you give in? Did you ignore? Did you redirect? So what was your response to the behavior? And then where does the behavior never or rarely occurs? So if you don't give them any demands, or like if you don't tell them to do something, it never happens. So you probably think that, oh, they're doing it because you're placing a demand on them. So that's what we call the ABC, or the functional behavioral analysis. So antecedent A is what happened before the behavior, and B is the behavior itself, so crying, kicking, screaming. And then the C is the consequence, or what did the child get from that? Did you give in, and so he got what he wanted, or did you ignore it, and so the behavior persisted? So that's what we always kind of go back to. What's the ABC of the behavior? So that's what we call the functional behavior analysis. I'm not sure if you've heard of this term, but school usually does this. So again, rather than focusing on the behavior itself, we kind of step back and see what the A, B, and C's are. As mentioned, antecedents, what happened before the behavior. And then behavior is the behavior itself, form, intensity, and duration. Okay, yeah. And so this is an example of like an assessment. So again, so Karen was the sink with the teacher. Oh, Amanda was at the sink with the teacher, Karen, and then she was instructed to wash her hands, and then she screamed and stomped her foot, and then the teacher tried to redirect her, but she's still persistent. So she's trying to escape that behavior, right? And so I'll be giving you, I have a couple of copies of here that you can do, so it gives you a guide of the ABC and what we can do about it. And then, yeah. So again, I think I've already talked about this. Again, on this kind of table, you'll be seeing more of this one, so I'm just gonna skip through it in the interest of time. And then lastly, let's see. Okay, so more tips. So again, cool down area. I think it would be nice for kids to have their kind of space that they can just retreat and kind of take them away from that upsetting environment. Ask open-ended questions. And so who, what, where, and why you can ask, but avoid asking why. Why did you cry? Why did you scream? Because you're basically you're kind of judging them right away instead of soliciting more information. So what happened? Who was involved? How did this thing, rather than why. And then disengage for parents. It's easy for us to be frustrated and get caught up in that situation, but I actually tell parents, I know it's easier said than done, but try to engage or just walk away. Obviously, make sure that they're safe, but just ignore. Don't show any emotions, because obviously the more that they see that you're upset, the more that they have an upper hand, like, oh, I can push her buttons, and yeah. Uh-huh.
And if you can imagine the speed of lightning,
Right.
this is something that he gets his hand in his diaper like lightning, and there's shit all over our house. Fast.
Okay.
How do you, like, for me, part of it is you're like, are you reacting? Well, yeah, I'm reacting. There's shit all over the place. And when I think this is happening, every 5 days.
I know.
And it's so fast. And we can't turn around and use the medication because if we miss a small bowel movement, it's everywhere. And yeah, I'm reacting. I'm reacting like this, and that's a good reaction because I'm not in a bad mood. So I'm right. But at the end of the day, I am mad.
Right.
And I'm carrying that child like this to the bathtub.
Yeah. I know it's, yeah.
And so I'm finding it impossible that one no reaction.
I know. It's difficult, yeah. The sensory, yeah. Automatic, yeah. Right. Factors. Right. I know. That's, yeah. Yeah. Of course. Right. Right. I wonder, have they done an ABC or the functional behavior analysis? Like, what instances surrounding that situation where he would do that? Is it attention? Or, I mean, again, I don't think it's attention. Because he's seeing your reaction. Right. Do you think there's a downtime, like he's bored? Because if they're engaged in something that they like, they wouldn't do that, right? But if there's a downtime, like, oh, what can I do? Right. Right. Yeah, those are hard. Yeah, but I think good data collection. And again, I know it's not an easy task. I know it's frustrating as well. And sometimes it could be automatic, like something internal that we can't really figure out. Like, is it more of a sensation that he just needs to do it? Or it could be, again, it could be downtime. Could it be attention seeking? It could be a lot of things. But yeah, again, ensuring that you get a good grasp of when would this happen, like all the time. Like if you kind of go back to the past month, the timing of this, what I see. Right. It's not consistent. Right. That's kind of hard, yeah. Yeah. A jump. Oh wow. Could. Right. Just so he can't get access to it. reach to it. Yeah, I see. Yeah, so again, we usually advise OT to kind of work with you and kind of teach those replacement behaviors. So something that he can, is it the sensation that he wants or the smell or something? So maybe put, exactly. And I know there's no easy way, there's no straightforward way. I know. Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, so, and just, yeah, are we, yeah. So again, last one would be use, no. Oh yeah, sorry. So yeah, using positive language. So a lot of times we always say, no, stop, don't do that. But instead, asking them, like telling them what you actually want them to do. So you say, stop running, but do you want me to lie down on the floor, skip, jump, right? So tell them, walk quietly or hands on your lap rather than saying, stop touching. So kind of putting it in a positive spin, right? And then providing frequent positive intentions. So a lot of times you always focus on the negative behavior, but try catching them in their good behavior, right? So it makes them feel good about themselves. You're giving them attention because every time you tell them no or stop, you're providing them attention, and so they associate that negative behavior. Oh, I have to do this negative behavior so that mom will see me. And then offer choices, because as you know, kids want independence. And then, yeah, so there are no fast fixes. I'm so sorry about that. I wish we, but yes, right. And yeah, and to reduce the behavior, again, we must replace it with a positive one, and that reducing problem takes time, problem solving, planning ahead, open-mindedness, and patience, which I'm sure you guys have a lot. But yeah, thank you so much. And if you have any questions or comments, feel free to reach me, of course. Yeah. Yeah.
And our daughter acts out when her younger sister steals her toys, and her younger sister's too, so she doesn't.
Sharing. Yeah.
She doesn't share. Our older daughter does, but the younger one doesn't. So would that be tangible?
Tangible, something that they want. So maybe saying it's your turn, her turn. So maybe, again, using visuals to kind of say, okay, it's your turn for 5 minutes, and then flip the card, and okay, it's younger sister's turn for 5 minutes. So you're kind of giving them, because the thing is they don't know if they're ever going to get back the toy. But again, if you use a visual timer saying, you'll get this toy back, so kind of giving them visual supports, I think would be beneficial.
So to respond, so if she hits her sister, like what should I do then? Should I take the toy away from her and give it back? Like,
yeah, again, yeah. So obviously if hitting is a no-no, definitely, right? And so she needs to know that she can't do that. So either you redirect them or just kind of remove them from that situation and kind of redirect them to something else. Or again, that's a teachable moment that if you want to teach sharing, then you can do the if then. And if they persist on hitting the younger sister, then teach them that's a consequence. It's a no-no that you lose your chance or opportunity to play with your toy because you're hitting, something like that.
So just be patient and
And again, sibling, I mean, those are, again, typical behavior. But again, if it happens a lot of times, then you have a lot of things that you can try. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, of course.
I think we have time for one more question, if anyone.
Yeah, so I have some stuff here that I can leave this. So activities to encourage speech and language development and the table for the behavior function.
Do we have electronic versions
I
of those?
can send that to Maggie.
That would be great.
Okay.
We can put them up on Facebook.
The Facebook, okay.
Yeah, as well.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Again, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.